Chapter 1650. As Zhou Wen was pondering over it, he saw the companion beast charge at the bee again. It had fused Zhou Wen's transcendent flying immortal and Zhao's trajectory movement technique, making it unbelievably fast. Wherever it passed, it left afterimages in the void. In less than a blink of an eye, the companion beast arrived in front of the bee again and threw a punch at it. Halfway through its attack, its fist actually split into dozens, like a tentacle splitting off, bombarding the little bee from different directions. Every fist that split off carried an extremely powerful sun divine beam. It was as though dozens of cold suns were striking the bee from different directions. This guy is a freak. He even learned the abilities of that electromagnetic monster. Zhou Wen didn't know what the limits of this companion beast were, but from the looks of it, it could learn any ability. It would be even more terrifying if it learned the bee's trumpet-blowing ability. Beat! The sound of the Swona suddenly sounded. It was earth-shattering as the fist was about to strike the bee's companion beast. As though it had suffered a heavy blow, it flew backward with a bang. The dozens of fists that split off constantly exploded. Its body seemed to be equipped with explosives as it constantly exploded. Zhou Wen was already very far from the battlefield, but the sound of the Swona immediately stirred the primordial energy in his body. It was like a nuclear reactor that could explode at any moment. Thankfully, Zhou Wen was relatively far from the battlefield. Furthermore, his sure domain had played a role, forcefully suppressing the rampaging primordial energy in his body. Otherwise, he might really explode like the companion beast. What the hell is that trumpet? It's too terrifying. Zhou Wen stared at the Swona that the bee had placed in its mouth, nearly drooling. Even a companion beast that was nearly invincible at the calamity grade had been blown apart by it. The might of the Swona was truly terrifying. Zhou Wen thought about it and realized that it made sense. Back in the War of Gods, there were countless terrifying experts who fought all the way to the cosmos. Creatures that could participate in such battles were definitely the cream of the crop in the mythical era. The item they brought naturally couldn't be ordinary. Furthermore, despite having been lost for so many years, the holy deity was still thinking about it. It was obvious how precious it was. However, after some thought, Zhou Wen couldn't figure out what powerful divine artifact was a Swona in myths and legends. Bang! As Zhou Wen pondered over it, he suddenly heard an explosion nearby. He saw a white and black one-horned wolf rush out of the underground cave. Just as they left the cave, their bodies exploded, turning into a bloody mist that filled the sky. When they were in the inner space of the planet, the sound attacks they received were weaker, and they could barely rely on their combined barrier to protect their lives. However, when they tried to escape, they were attacked by the sound after coming out of the underground cave. Their bodies couldn't take it and immediately exploded. Zhou Wen's eyes were sharp as he realized that two crystal-like companion eggs, one black and one white, had fallen out of the black and white wolf's blood fog. His eyes immediately lit up. The Swona's sound came to an end as the sound waves it produced weakened. Without any hesitation, Zhou Wen teleported over and grabbed the two companion eggs with each hand before teleporting back. He didn't wish to leave just like that. Even if Tsukuyumi had met with misfortune, he had to at least see her corpse before he could leave with peace of mind. When Zhou Wen went to snatch the companion egg, he saw the strange fish rush out of the underground cave and charge at the bee without any fear of death. On the other side, Nine Yang and Xiao appeared out of nowhere. Their 7 orifices were bleeding, and the situation didn't look good. "Retreat!" Xiao Luo shouted in a low voice. He wanted to use the trajectory technique to escape into the void. Neither of these two companion beasts was to be trifled with. Even if they joined forces with Zhou Wen and Nine Yang, they wouldn't be able to gain any advantage. They might even lose their lives here. Nine Suns also planned to rush out of the atmosphere. In space, the transmission of sound would be greatly limited. The bee clearly wasn't interested in them as it kept staring at the companion beast that had exploded. The companion beast's body had already been blasted to smithereens, but very quickly, the blasted body reformed and the wounds vanished. This was the electromagnetic monster's ability. However, when used by a companion beast, the effects were even more ridiculous than when the electromagnetic monster used it. The strange fish had already arrived above the bee. Its tail transformed into a cloth that blotted out the sky as it scattered down, enveloping the bee. Zhou imagined that the bee was going to blow the Swana again, so he quickly retreated, hoping to stay further away. However, to his surprise, the bee didn't blow the Swana this time. Its tail flashed with a cold light. Zhou saw the cold light pierce through the strange fish's tail and into its body. The strange fish's body, which had turned white after being controlled by the companion beast, instantly turned black before collapsing, turning into dust that filled the sky. Zhou vision was in no way inferior to a calamity-grade expert. Furthermore, with Truth Listener's help, he could clearly see that the strange fish's body had been disintegrated into tiny black particles. After the black particles dispersed and disintegrated, Zhou couldn't see them anymore. This thing. Could it be poison elemental? Zhou thought of his Dr. Darkness companion beast. Dr. Darkness had evolved by absorbing poison. He had recently advanced to the Terror grade, but he hadn't found a stronger poison to advance him to the Calamity grade. If this bee was really poison elemental, the poison power it had just used was extremely terrifying. If Dr. Darkness were to absorb it, he didn't know what would happen. However, Zhou wasn't sure if it was a poison elemental power. Even if it was, he didn't know if the Terror-grade Dr. Darkness could withstand such a terrifying poison. After all, even a Heaven Realm creature had been poisoned to death with a single needle. The Terror-grade Dr. Darkness might be poisoned to death and disintegrated before he could advance to the Calamity grade. No good. This planet seems to have been locked by some force. We can't leave. Xiao and Nine Yang's expressions were abnormally nasty. They had attempted to escape, but they failed to rush out. The entire planet seemed to be sealed by some strange force. Even Zhao's void trajectory power couldn't escape. On the other side, the companion beast that had healed pounced at the bee again. Clearly, it wanted to snatch the Swana it controlled. The bee seemed to know that its poison stinger was useless against the companion beast. It might even be absorbed and learned by the companion beast. Therefore, it didn't use the same method it used against the strange fish to deal with the companion beast. Instead, it blew the Swana again. This time, the sound was somewhat different from before. Although it was still high-pitched, it also made one feel as though they were crying and lamenting. This tune. Zhou knew that it was the bubble music he had heard many times by the pool. Chapter 1651. With the sound of the Swana, the companion beast that was charging at B suddenly felt as though it was shackled. Its movements became abnormally slow. Furthermore, there seemed to be a downward force that pulled the companion beast towards the planet's ground. As B blew the Swana, she easily dodged the companion beast's attack. Zhou and company were already very far away from the battlefield, but the sound of the Swana made their knees sink. Their bodies leaned forward, and they had the urge to kneel down. "What's wrong with your faces?" Nine Yang suddenly shouted. Zhou and Xiao didn't feel anything amiss, but when they looked at each other, they realized that tears had unknowingly fallen from the corners of their eyes and flowed down their cheeks. Zhou wiped the tears off his face, but the corners of his eyes still couldn't stop the tears from flowing out. "Same for you," Xiao said in a deep voice as he glanced at Nine Yang. Nine Yang reached out to wipe his face and indeed, he realized that his face was covered in tears. He couldn't help but reveal a look of horror. "It's the power of the music." Zhou circulated his teacher domain with all his might, hoping to block out the distant sounds, but he couldn't completely block them. The sound of the Swana seemed to ring in his head, causing more and more tears to flow. Nine Yang and Xiao were in an even worse state. Their faces were already covered in tears. What was even more terrifying was that they felt their knees sink deeper and deeper. Their bodies were on the verge of collapse, as though they would kneel down at any moment. Boom! The companion beast on the battlefield landed on the planet. Its knees were also bent, and the strength on its body kept erupting as though it was resisting some invisible force. Just like Zhou and company, the companion beast's face was covered in tears. In its huge eyes, tears constantly flowed out as though it was experiencing something extremely sad. "Damn it, you mustn't kneel down. You might die." Seeing the companion beast struggle desperately to kneel, Xiao had a bad feeling. He tried his best to stop his knees from bending, but the effect wasn't obvious. His legs still involuntarily bent. Zhou and Ninyang were the same. As they cried, they desperately supported their bodies to prevent themselves from kneeling down, but the effects weren't ideal. Zhou tried a few methods, but none of them were effective. When he saw that the companion beast was similarly unable to escape the magic of the music, he knew that ordinary powers were useless. If even the top companion beasts in the calamity couldn't withstand the sound, it was even more difficult for them to withstand it. Seeing that his knees were getting closer and closer to the ground, Zhou gritted his teeth and summoned hundreds of thousands of musical note sprite companion beasts. Then, he used the golden harp to control them and made them play the bubble music he had heard by the pool. Zhou didn't know if it was useful, but he was treating it as a last resort. It was possible that the outcome of doing so would accelerate their kneeling, but at this point in time, he had no other choice but to give it a try. After summoning the musical note sprite and golden harp, they weren't affected by the demonic sound, giving Zhou a glimmer of hope. Under the control of the golden harp, the note sprites began to play bubble music. Strangely enough, it was the same music, but the effect played by the musical note sprites was somewhat different from that of the Swana. The sound waves produced by hundreds of thousands of musical note sprites combined with the sound of the Swana. The trio's tears immediately streamed down as their knees sank. They were less than a foot off the ground. F***ck, Zhou, what are you doing? Ninyang couldn't help but curse in fright. Zhou hurriedly made the musical note sprites stop playing. He had expected such a possibility, but he never expected it to be the worst situation. Zhou, get your musical note sprites to continue playing that music, Xiao suddenly said. Zhou was first taken aback before he immediately thought of something. Xiao also said, don't let their rhythm be the same as the Swana's. Don't let the beat be staggered. Zhou had already begun doing it. Although he didn't know if it would be effective or if it might even make them kneel faster, the final outcome would be the same if he didn't do anything. It was just that they would kneel slower. Following the golden harp's melody, a portion of the hundreds of thousands of musical note sprites produced a rhythmic tune. The tune was the same as the Swana's, but the beat was just different. The musical note sprites that filled the sky surrounded the trio like countless butterflies dancing around them. The sound waves constantly reverberated around them. Zhou and company were so nervous that their foreheads were covered in sweat. Tears were still streaming down their cheeks. Zhou was prepared to order the musical note sprites to stop playing at any moment. However, after the music sounded this time, the trio's knees didn't suddenly sink. Instead, the speed at which they sank slowed down significantly. Even fewer tears flowed out. It's effective. Zhou was overjoyed as he hurriedly ordered all the musical note sprites to play together. Waves of sound waves constantly reverberated. Due to the mismatch in the rhythm, it created a very discordant feeling with the Swana's sound. Although Zhou and company could still hear the Swana's sound and their tears were still flowing, the speed at which they flowed had slowed down significantly. The force of their knees sinking had also weakened, allowing them to barely withstand it and not continue sinking. Zhou was feeling somewhat conflicted. The bubble music combined with hundreds of thousands of musical note sprites was indeed effective. If he used this power to help the companion beast, it might be able to escape the restraints of the music. He might even have the strength to fight. The problem was that neither companion beast was good. One blowing the trumpet would kill them, and the other would kill them without blowing the trumpet. Regardless of which one Zhou helped, the outcome might not be good. After a moment of hesitation, Zhou controlled the golden harp and tried his best to control the sound waves near them, preventing the musical note sprite's power from affecting the companion beast. The companion beast would definitely kill them. The bee had only shown hostility towards the companion beast for the time being and hadn't targeted them. Zhou decided to place his bets on the bee. Such a decision was also extremely risky. This was because the bee had a treasure like the swana. It was highly likely that it was a parasitic companion beast that could parasitize others and rob them of their nutrients or even their lives. It was impossible for it to be a docile companion beast. After it killed the other companion beast, it was very likely that it would kill Zhou and company. However, at this point in time they had to make a choice. The rest was up to fate. Under the swana's demonic sound, the companion beast's knees approached the ground. Even something as powerful as it was unable to withstand the demonic and godly sound. Bam! One of the companion beast's knees knelt on the ground, causing cracks that stretched for several kilometers to appear on the ground. Chapter 1652. The companion beast continued persevering as it shot out treasure-fall coins, but they couldn't eliminate the influence of the power it suffered. The treasure-fall coins that flew out were easily dodged by the bee blowing the swana. Bam! With another loud bang, the companion beast's other leg knelt to the ground. Its hands pressed against the shattered ground as it gritted its teeth and struggled with all its might, but it was unable to get up no matter what. Its eyes were already twisted, and tears fell down like torrential rain. And a strange scene happened. The companion beast's white jade-like body began to emit black flames. Every inch of its body seemed to emit a transparent black gas. The black gas was indistinct, like the aura of death that came from the netherworld. It emitted an ominous aura. As the black gas rose, the extremely powerful companion beast's vitality rapidly drained away. Even its essence energy rapidly weakened. The body that looked like it was carved out of white jade also aged and shriveled. In just a moment, the companion beast's body looked like it was about to turn from a young man to an old man. Its jade-like body was covered in wrinkles, and its original white color gradually turned yellow, like an old newspaper that had experienced the baptism of time. Zhou and company shuddered in fear as they secretly rejoiced that they hadn't knelt down. Otherwise, they would have long been dead. However, even if the musical note sprites could temporarily resist the bee's swana, Zhou and company still couldn't escape. Once the companion beast died, it would probably be their turn. Although Zhou had already decided to bet on the bee, he wasn't confident when he saw the situation. He even had the thought of helping the companion beast stall for time through checks and balances. However, Zhou eventually gave up on this idea. The musical note sprite army wasn't really able to resist the swana. Even if he was willing to help the companion beast, he might not be able to help. Instead, it might anger the bee. Perhaps the little bee didn't want to take their lives, but his actions had backfired on him. Furthermore, Zhou had other plans in mind. If the bee really wanted to blow them to death, Zhou would definitely have to kneel. His life providence would most likely not sit idly by. After all, he wasn't the one who wanted to kneel, but he was forced to kneel. With the sigh of the king's temper, how could it tolerate such a thing? As for whether the sigh of the king's power could resist the swana's sound, that wasn't something Zhou knew. When the time came, he could only leave it up to fate. Looks like we're all going to die here today. Ninyang glanced at Zhou and said, I don't have any goals in life, nor do I have any wishes. My only regret is that I can't defeat you with my own hand. Look at the situation now. You're still thinking about this. You'd better think about how to save your life. Zhou was somewhat speechless. What kind of person was this? They were still thinking about such things at such a time. It's precisely because it's hard to tell whether he's going to live or die. Who knows, he might die right away. If we don't explain things clearly now, we won't be able to die in peace. Jiuyang said. Zhou thought to himself, how can I be happy when I'm already dead? I've never heard of anyone being able to die a happy death. Xiao, do you have any thoughts? Zhou couldn't be bothered with Nine Yang as he turned to look at Xiao. Xiao frowned and pondered for a moment before saying with a serious expression, if you have anything to say, just say it. It might be a form of relief. Zhou was even more speechless. However, on second thought, he asked Nine Yang and Xiao, since we're about to die, can you tell me if Ouyang Ting, who you captured, is still alive? Why did you capture him? Zhou gaze was mainly focused on Nine Yang. He felt that this fellow was rather reliable. At such a time, he might be able to tell the truth. As for Xiao, even if he really deserved to die, Zhou didn't dare believe his words. He's alive. Don't ask me anything else. I don't know, Nine Yang said. Zhou couldn't help but be delighted when he saw that Nine Yang didn't seem to be lying. As long as he was alive, there was still a chance to rescue him in the future. Furthermore, from Nine Yang's words, it seemed like Xiao knew more. Hence, he cast his gaze at Xiao. Xiao said expressionlessly, even if I die for matters related to the Holy Land, I will only let it rot in my stomach. Furthermore, we might not die now. You have a solution? Nine Yang and Zhou eyes lit up. It's very simple. As long as that bee doesn't want to kill us, we naturally don't have to die, Xiao said indifferently. There's no need for you to tell me that. I know. Zhou was somewhat helpless. All he could do was ask Nine Yang, where did you saints come from? Why do you work so hard for the Holy Land? Haven't you ever thought that the Holy Land is enslaving your own kind? Nine Yang shook his head and said, our so-called own kind are just strange lifeforms. What's the difference between us and other creatures we don't know? What does our lives have to do with us? Although Zhou didn't agree with Nine Yang's words, from Nine Yang's point of view, what he said wasn't without reason. Saints had been nurtured by the Holy Land from a young age. Their living environment was different from ordinary humans, so it was normal for them to not have a sense of belonging to the human race. Just as Zhou was about to ask something, he suddenly heard a long howl. He saw the companion beast roaring at the sky. As for its body, it was already at the end of its rope. What flowed out of its eyes wasn't tears, but blood in its body. Furthermore, even the blood had been drained. This was a companion beast. If it were an ordinary dimensional creature, it might have died long ago. After this long howl, the companion beast completely lost its resistance. It was pulled by the power of the music as its head slammed into the ground as though it was kowtowing. With this kowtow, its body instantly disintegrated. Most of its body turned into black gas that rose up. The black gas condensed into a shape in the air that vaguely resembled the companion beast when it was alive. Then, it slowly rose into the sky before slowly dissipating. Something dropped from the spot where the companion beast was. It was a strange crystal. The crystal had many faces, and a few of them were engraved with strange patterns. Zhou found the patterns rather familiar. On careful look, one of them was the treasure fall coin, and another was an electromagnetic monster. There were a few patterns that were lines. They weren't complete, but the concept contained in the lines was vaguely similar to Zhou transcendent flying immortal and Zhao's trajectory. Is this the calamity transformation origins of that companion beast? Zhou stared at the crystal and thought. Chapter 1653. Zhou wished he could immediately pounce forward and snatch the calamity origins. It was a calamity origins at the heaven realm, and it wasn't an ordinary one. However, Zhou didn't dare take a single step. In front of the bee, he didn't dare have any delusions. Preserving his life was already his greatest hope. The bee moved the swana away from its mouth, and didn't continue playing it. However, before Zhou and company could heave a sigh of relief, The bee flapped its wings and flew towards them. The little bee didn't fly very fast. It slowly landed on the ground. The trio didn't dare move. Out of their 6 eyes, only their eyeballs were moving as they kept watching the bee's movements. The little bee carried the Swona and floated in the air, slowly descending toward the origin of catastrophe. Xiao and Nine Yang's tense nerves relaxed a little. Up to now, the bee didn't seem to have any intention of killing them. Xiao and Nine Yang weren't afraid of a calamity-grade creature. Even if it was such a freakish companion beast from before, they still had the ability to fight to the death. However, the Swona's power had already exceeded the limits of a calamity-grade creature. They had only suffered some of the repercussions of the Swona's sound and nearly died, much less fight it head-on. The bee wasn't enough to scare them, but the Swona made them feel fear. Even Zhou Wen was no exception. Although Zhou Wen still had one last move to make, even he didn't know how useful that move would be. Therefore, it was best not to take it if he could avoid it. The 3 of them watched as the little bee flew to the side of the catastrophe origin source. It reached out its claws to grab the catastrophe origin source and picked up the strange crystal. The bee clearly didn't have the ability of the companion beast, so it couldn't directly devour the calamity origins. It hugged the calamity origins, hoping to absorb its energy. That bee might not be a parasitic companion beast, but a companion beast born from this planet, Xiao suddenly said. Why? Zhou Wen and Nine Yang were taken aback. They had always believed that the bee was a companion beast that parasitized this planet. After all, it had such a divine artifact in its hand, making it more compatible with a parasitic companion beast. Xiao said, "Didn't you realize that this planet didn't change at all after the companion beast died?" Zhou Wen and Nine Yang immediately realized the problem when they heard Zhao's words. Once a companion beast born from a planet was born, the planet would suffer a destructive blow and explode. Or like Venus, it was very likely for half of it to be blown up. However, when the companion beast appeared, although it caused some changes on the planet continued to operate normally until its death. As for the changes and damage on the planet's surface, it didn't affect it much. In that case, that companion beast really doesn't look like a companion beast born from this planet. It doesn't have any connection with this planet, Nine Yang said after some thought. If this bee is a companion beast born from this planet, why is the divine artifact that was snatched away by the parasitic companion beast in the bee's hands? Zhou Wen said after some thought. Although he also felt that the companion beast didn't look like it was born on this planet, there was no way to explain this question. This isn't difficult to explain. After that companion beast parasitized the planet's interior, it failed to completely control the companion beast produced by the planet itself. Instead, it had its divine artifact snatched away. Or rather, it had no choice but to get rid of the divine artifact, allowing the companion beast produced by the planet to benefit. That's probably the case. It's hard to guess the exact situation for the time being. Xiao paused for a moment before continuing. The reason why I said that the bee is a companion beast nurtured by this planet is only part of the reason. Another important reason is that although the companion beast's abilities are strange, its powers don't match this planet. However, this bee is different. Its powers have a faint resonance with this planet. Its power resonates with this planet? Why didn't I notice? Nine Yang said in puzzlement. This planet is covered in glaciers. The companion beasts that are produced should have some ice elemental powers, right? That little bee shouldn't have any ice-type power, right? It's not ice elemental power, Zhou Wen said after some thought. Zhou Wen pondered for a moment and said, Xiao is right. That little bee does have an intrinsic connection with this planet. Up to now, this connection has continued. Then what is it? Nine Yang still didn't understand what Xiao and Zhou Wen were talking about. You are too slow, Xiao explained helplessly. Xiao explained helplessly. Haven't you noticed that the restriction on this planet hasn't been removed yet? If that companion beast was really born from this planet, even if the planet doesn't explode after its death, the restrictions should be removed. I see. Nine Yang's reaction was indeed slow at times. That was his nature, but once he entered a situation, his thoughts were more than a normal person's. If the bee is really a companion beast born from this planet and possesses the divine artifact snatched from the mythical war, wouldn't we be in greater danger now that it has killed the parasitic companion beast? Nine Yang said. Xiao sighed and said, indeed. Unless it isn't excited about us at all, our situation is even more dangerous than when we were being pursued by that companion beast. As the three of them spoke, the bee's claws hugged the Calamity Origins as it flapped its wings and flew towards them. Zhou Wen's heart immediately chilled. Xiao and Nine Yang weren't any better. Although the bee wasn't blowing the trumpet and there were no music restrictions, allowing them to move freely. However, the restrictions of the planet still existed. As long as they couldn't leave the planet, it wouldn't be of much use even if they teleported to the other end of the planet. Once the bee's trumpet sounded, those who had to kneel still had to kneel. Now, Zhou Wen could only be glad that this thing didn't appear on Earth. Otherwise, 99% of the humans on Earth would probably die the moment the trumpet sounded. There weren't many who had the right to kneel and kowtow. It was useless to escape, so the three of them didn't move. Their 6 eyes stared at the bee that slowly flew over. Zhou Wen felt that something was amiss because the bee was flying straight at him. Indeed, when the bee flew in front of him, it had no intention of continuing flying away. It circled Zhou Wen a few times as though it was sizing him up. Zhou Wen's muscles tensed up as he prepared to risk his life at any moment. However, the bee didn't attack Zhou Wen. After circling a few times, it flew into the distance. After flying for a short distance, the bee suddenly stopped. It raised its trumpet and blew at Zhou Wen. Chapter 1654. Zhou Wen was immediately frightened out of his wits. As he retreated with all his might, he ordered the golden harp to gather the power of hundreds of thousands of musical note sprites in a bid to resist the bee's swona. However, Zhou Wen knew very well that even the power of hundreds of thousands of musical note sprites and the golden harp was no match for the bee's swona. After all, it was a power that could easily kill a heaven-level creature. Zhou Wen already had the resolve to kneel, so he could only place his hopes on the side of the king. However, the moment the swona sounded, Zhou Wen was taken aback. This was because the music produced by the bee was somewhat different from the tune he had heard before. If the song Zhou Wen had previously heard was the summoning of death, filled with sorrow that made one weep, then the song he was hearing now didn't feel sad at all. It even made him feel joyful. It was unbelievable that 2 extremes of music, one sad and one happy, were performed by the same instrument. Furthermore, Zhou Wen didn't feel the urge to commit suicide from the bee's instrument. Although the essence energy in his body stirred with the music, it wasn't the kind of explosive agitation. Instead, it was an indescribable impulse. His essence energy became abnormally active, but this activity didn't cause any harm to Zhou Wen's body. The only thing was that Zhou Wen's body was similarly restrained amidst this music. Not to mention teleporting, even moving became extremely difficult. Thankfully, Zhou Wen didn't feel the force pulling him to his knees. However, on second thought, he felt that this was even worse. If he knelt, he might be able to trigger the sigh of the king. Now that he didn't need to kneel, didn't that mean he couldn't even trigger the sigh of the king? He couldn't even use his final trump card. Just as Zhou Wen was thinking, he saw the bee slowly turn around and fly in a certain direction as it played the swona. Xiao, Nine Yang, and Zhou Wen were delighted. If the bee didn't plan on killing them and just left, they would be able to keep their lives. However, to their surprise, when the bee turned around and flew away, their bodies were out of their control as they flew in the direction of the bee's flight. The golden harp led hundreds of thousands of musical note sprites to play in unison, but it didn't affect the tune produced by the bee. After all, it was completely different from the tune from before. Zhouwen had never heard it before, so it was too late to learn it now. What does it want? Zhouwen was alarmed and puzzled. He didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse. If the little bee really wanted to kill them, she could have just played the song of death. There seemed to be no need to do this. But if the little bee didn't want to kill them and just let them go, why did she blow such a strange song? The three of them were forced to follow the little bee. Because of the power of the music, they could only walk on the ground, unable to fly. The planet had just gone through a great battle, and there were glaciers and rock ruins everywhere. They could not change their direction as they walked forward. From time to time, they would bump into ice and rocks and even fall off cliffs. It was a very embarrassing situation. Fortunately, the three of them were physically strong, so they were only in a sorry state and did not suffer any serious injuries. Say, where do you think this little bee is taking us? Don't tell me it wants to bring us to its nest and make us into food reserves? Nine Yang said with an odd expression. Zhouwen thought for a moment and felt that Nine Yang's words sounded unreliable, but on careful thought, it did make sense. The little bee wasn't that companion beast. It didn't have a powerful devouring ability. It couldn't even devour and digest the calamity origins of the companion beast, much less devour the three of them. It made sense to bring them back as food reserve. Since that holy god of yours is so powerful, didn't he leave any backup plans for you before you came? Zhouwen asked. If he had any means, we would have used them long ago. Would we have waited until now? Xiao curled her lips and said, however, I don't think this little bee has any ill intentions towards us. At the very least, it doesn't have any ill intentions towards Nine Yang and me. Zhouwen was even more depressed when he heard that. Xiao was right. The little bee seemed to be targeting Zhouwen from the beginning. Xiao and Nine Yang were only affected. Zhouwen, is there something special on you that attracted that little bee? Xiao asked Zhouwen. If I really have something on me that it likes, do you think it won't come to snatch it? Zhouwen said unhappily. Xiao thought for a moment and felt that Zhouwen was right. If the little bee really took a fancy to something on Zhouwen, it could just kill him to snatch it. There was no need to go through so much trouble. If it's not interested in something, could it be that it's interested in you as a person? As Xiao walked forward involuntarily, he sized up Zhouwen from the corner of his eyes, as though he wanted to figure out what Zhouwen had that could attract the little bee. When Nine Yang heard Zhao's words, he seemed to be enlightened as he said, if the little bee is really a companion beast born from this planet, then the planet's energy was originally provided to it. Now, at least half of it has been sucked away by that companion beast, preventing it from fully evolving. Now, has it chosen Zhouwen and wants to use Zhouwen's body to parasitize him? The color in Zhouwen's face immediately drained when he heard that. What Nine Yang said seemed to make sense. Imagining the little bee burrowing into his body and slowly gnawing away at his organs, Zhouwen couldn't help but shiver. No way. In terms of physical levels, you are much stronger than me. Even if it wants to parasitize someone, it should be parasitizing your bodies. It shouldn't be my turn, Zhouwen said. That might not be the case. Perhaps the little bee likes a talented host like you, Xiao said. Talented my ass. I'm just an ordinary person, Zhouwen hurriedly said. Ordinary? Nine Yang and Xiao looked at him sideways. They didn't think so. Zhouwen's domain power clearly hadn't reached the perfect level of a heaven realm. It wasn't even comparable to a hell realm domain, but his domain power was able to fight against a heaven realm expert. Furthermore, he had multiple domains. What was even more terrifying was that there were no guardian or other creature's genes on him. It was as though he was a calamity that had advanced from a pure-blooded human. If such a person was still called an ordinary person, then they really didn't know what kind of person in this world wasn't ordinary. As the three of them spoke, the little bee had already flown into a glacier rift. The three of them couldn't help but fall. Bam! 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 The three of them fell to the bottom of the rift, smashing open 3 holes in the ice. When they crawled out of the ice holes, they realized that the little bee had stopped playing and was looking at an ice cave. Zhou traced the little bee's gaze, and when he saw the scene of the ice cave, his eyes widened and his mouth gaped. He nearly cried out. Chapter 1655. Tsukuyumi isn't dead. Zhou was pleasantly surprised when he saw Tsukuyumi sitting cross-legged in the ice cave. Tsukuyumi had been unable to move previously, and she had been affected by the battle. Zhou originally believed that she had likely suffered a mishap. He didn't expect to see Tsukuyumi again. Although her situation didn't look good, she was still alive. It was fine as long as she was alive. Tsukuyumi sat cross-legged in the ice cave, circulating the power of moonlight as though she was healing her injuries. There were no visible injuries on her body. It was likely that she had been disturbed during her evolution and suffered internal injuries. Why is Little Bee looking for Tsukuyumi? Could it be that you want to wipe us out? As Zhou mind raced, he couldn't care less as he warned Tsukuyumi loudly. However, Zhou voice didn't reach the ice cave at all. This was because the bee had started blowing the swana again. The sound of the swana drowned out Zhou voice. Ignoring Tsukuyumi, who was far away in the ice cave, even Xiao and Nine Yang, who were nearby, couldn't hear what he was shouting. The moment the swana sounded, the trio's bodies were controlled once again. No matter how they struggled, they couldn't escape the swana's control. Even the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder and sure you were useless. Truth listeners' evil warding didn't have any effect, making Zhou unsure which power the swana's sound belonged to. Zhou couldn't help but walk towards the bee, but he soon realized that something was amiss. He was controlled by the voice to walk toward where Little Bee was, but Xiao and Nine Yang did not walk over with him. They were still standing where they were. Zhou could even see Xiao and Nine Yang trying their best to move their bodies, but they couldn't move at all. They stood rooted to the ground as though they had been nailed to the spot. It's over. Could it be as Nine Yang said? This wasp wants to use me as a parasitic target? A chill ran down Zhou's spine. His mind raced as he thought about how he could make a final attempt to escape the bee's control. However, he saw Tsukuyumi, who was in the ice cave, be forced out. Tsukuyumi clearly saw Zhou as well. She opened her mouth as though she was saying something to him, but due to the sound of the swana, Zhou couldn't hear what she was saying even though they weren't far apart. However, from the looks of it, she seemed rather flustered. She probably didn't know what had happened. Now, Zhou regretted not learning how to read lips. If he knew how to read lips, he would at least know what Tsukuyumi was saying and wouldn't be in such a rush. Thankfully, the two of them were walking towards the bee. As the distance between them shortened, Zhou could roughly hear Tsukuyumi's words when they were less than 100 meters away. What happened here? Tsukuyumi asked in panic. It's a long story, Zhou said with a bitter smile. Too many things had happened in between. It was impossible to explain them in a short period of time. Ignore that for now. Let's give it a try and see if there's any way to escape the swana's control. Zhou could only hope that Tsukuyumi had a way to escape the swana's voice. Tsukuyumi was likely at the hell stage before this. After absorbing the power of the moon essence basin, if nothing unexpected happened, she should be at the heaven stage. He didn't know what her situation was or if she had advanced perfectly. If she was already at the heaven stage, there might be a way. I've already tried. It doesn't work. That sound is too strange. I can't affect it with the powers of the sound element. Similarly, I can't affect it with the powers of space, Tsukuyumi said with a shake of her head. As the two of them spoke, they were less than 50 meters away from each other. Furthermore, they were still approaching. Between them was the bee that was playing the swana. Even you can't do anything about it. Then we can only leave it to fate. I hope that the bee doesn't want our lives, Zhou said with a sigh. If he really had to be parasitized by the bee, Zhou could only accept it. He only hoped that the bee wouldn't suck him dry after parasitizing him. That way, he wouldn't have the time to think of a solution. If it really didn't work, Zhou would make a trip to Chess Mountain. He would rather sign an unfair treaty with the Dharch than be parasitized by the bee and have his blood sucked dry. However, the bee's current actions still puzzled Zhou. If the bee really wanted to parasitize someone, it should only be able to parasitize one person. Then, why did it bring both Zhou and Tsukuyomi over? Could it be that this fellow wants to choose a host like how ancient emperors chose concubines? Is he going to gather the beauties together to compare their height? Zhou thought for a long time, but he couldn't figure out what the bee was up to. At that moment, the two of them had already walked very close to the bee. When the distance between Zhou and Tsukuyomi was only 1 or 2 steps, the two of them finally stopped and stood facing each other. The bee's music also stopped, but Zhou realized that his body was still being controlled, making it difficult for him to move freely. What happened here? Tsukuyomi asked Zhou with a heavy expression. Sigh, I also want to know what happened, Zhou said with a sigh. Zhou said with a sigh. Although he had watched the bee's birth, he really didn't know what it was up to. Just as Tsukuyomi was about to say something, she heard an earth-shattering swana sound. The little bee was right above their heads, too close to them. This time, the sound of the swana was louder than any of the previous ones. It was as if it was blowing directly into their souls, causing them to tremble. Thankfully, although the sound was a little terrifying, it didn't seem to have any practical effects. Apart from being unable to move, nothing else happened to their bodies. Just as Zhou was guessing what the bee's blow meant, he suddenly felt something amiss. Something automatically flew out of the chaos bead. Zhou was immediately alarmed. One had to know that the chaos space in the chaos bead was equivalent to another spacetime. Unless Zhou opened the chaos bead himself, the things inside shouldn't be affected by the outside world. Now that something had flown out, it was clearly affected by the swana's sound. This made Zhou even more alarmed at the swana's power. Zhou took a careful look and saw that the thing that flew out of the chaos bead was a token. It was the heavenly happiness token that Emperor of Shang had given him. The heavenly happiness token was actually a palm-sized stone token. There was a red word, happiness, on it. At that moment, the heavenly happiness token was floating between Zhou and Tsukuyomi. The word happiness on the originally ordinary stone token shimmered with a strange luster. Chapter 1656. The sudden appearance of the heavenly joy token made Zhou immediately realize something. When Emperor of Shang gave him the heavenly joy token, he didn't say anything. He even gave it very casually, as though the heavenly joy token was an insignificant item. However, ever since Zhou obtained the heavenly joy token, the things that had happened around it made Zhou vaguely understand that this heavenly joy token was definitely very important. Just the characteristic of allowing a calamity creature to stay on Earth was extremely terrifying. On Earth, other than humans, all creatures would be forced to leave Earth and head to the universe once they advanced to the calamity stage. Even if they managed to stay, they would definitely be suppressed by the rules or sealed themselves, weakening their strength to the level of a calamity before they could stay on Earth. The most direct example was the antelope. Such a strong fellow like the antelope was definitely a calamity grade super, and it was not an ordinary calamity grade either. However, its cultivation had always been sealed. Even when it was heavily injured, it did not dare release its strength casually. With humanity's current standards, if a calamity creature could stay on Earth, there would be no way for humans to survive. Earth would have long been ruled by mutated creatures. Now, the heavenly joy token was dazzling. Rays of light swirled as a joyous aura rose. It was like a red lantern hanging above Zhou and Tsukuyomi. Beep, beep on the other side, Little Bee was still mustering all her strength as she kept blowing the swana. As the swana music played, the glow on the heavenly joy token intensified. Zhou and Tsukuyomi couldn't help but turn in the direction of the heavenly joy token. Xiao, why do I find this scene a little familiar? Nine Yang, who was standing by the side as punishment, said with a frown when he saw the scene in front of him. Xiao said with a strange expression, if I'm not wrong, what they're doing now looks like a custom from ancient times. When Nine Yang heard Xiao say that, his eyes lit up. Yes, that's right. It's a custom. What's that custom called again? This was because many traditional customs were already extinct in the Federation, much less Nine Yang, who was born in the Holy Land. He had only occasionally read some historical information, so he didn't have a deep impression of it. He couldn't recall it for a moment. Bow to the heavens and earth, Xiao continued. It's an ancient wedding in the East District. That's right. When I was reading the information in the past, I happened to see it. The music seems to be very similar to the music played by the bee. How should I put it? It's festive. Nine Yang's expression turned odd. But this is just too strange. A companion beast born on a distant planet actually knows how to bow to the heavens and earth. This is just too bizarre. What is it trying to do? Is this really bowing to heaven and earth? I think it shouldn't be wrong. Xiao looked at Zhou Wen and Tsukuyumi, his thoughts a mystery. If I remember correctly, there are 3 steps to bowing to the heavens and earth. First, you bow to the heavens and earth, then you bow to your ancestors, and finally you bow to your husband and wife. After that, you enter the bridal chamber to be considered a true husband and wife. Just as Nine Yang was speaking, he heard the sound of the little bee's swona suddenly become resounding and profound. The entire swona was lifted up and blown into the void, as if it was paying respects to something. With the sound of the swona, Zhou Wen and Tsukuyumi involuntarily knelt towards the heavenly joy token and slowly bowed. Zhou Wen and Tsukuyumi naturally heard the conversation between Xiao and Nine Yang. Zhou Wen didn't find it strange at all. The heavenly joy token was an item that controlled marriage. Since it had appeared, Zhou Wen wouldn't believe that this matter had nothing to do with marriage. Zhou Wen didn't have any feelings about bowing to the heavens and earth. Even if he really bowed to the heavens and Tsukuyumi and got married because of the heavenly joy token, it didn't mean anything. Ignoring the fact that the two of them were forced, even if they weren't forced, it wasn't difficult for modern people to divorce. Zhou Wen was worried about why the bee was doing this. What benefits would his marriage with Tsukuyumi bring to the bee? Wait, could it be? Zhou Wen thought of a possibility and felt his scalp tingle. The ability of something like the heavenly joy token was very likely more than just a formality. Otherwise, it would be too useless for such a divine artifact to only be used for a wedding. If the heavenly joy token had a more specific use, it was very likely that it would allow Zhou Wen and Tsukuyumi to consummate their marriage. It was even possible for them to directly conceive a child. Thinking back to his previous guess that the bee wanted to parasitize him, Zhou Wen's back was already covered in cold sweat. He increasingly felt that it was very likely that the bee wanted to parasitize their future embryos. Typically, humans and dimensional creatures definitely had reproductive isolation, but something like the heavenly joy token was extremely odd. It might produce a special effect that broke through such restrictions. The more Zhou Wen thought about it, the more terrifying he felt. He tried his best not to kneel, but his body involuntarily sank. He couldn't stop it at all. All he could do was delay it a little. On the other side, Tsukuyumi was also struggling with all her might, but it similarly didn't have much effect. No matter what it wants to do, I won't let anything you don't like happen, Tsukuyumi suddenly said. Her tone was somewhat odd, as though she was determined. Zhou Wen and Tsukuyumi knelt down side by side. Upon hearing her voice, he could only use the corner of his eye to look at Tsukuyumi. He saw that her expression was resolute and that a strange force was being nurtured in her body. You have a solution? Zhou Wen was delighted. Since Tsukuyumi still had strength, she might be able to escape her current predicament. Yes. Tsukuyumi nodded. Then hurry up and use it. I can't hold on any longer. If you don't use it, I'll really kneel down. Zhou was overjoyed when he heard that as he hurriedly urged Tsukuyomi. Don't worry. I've said it before. No one can force you to do something you don't like in front of me, Tsukuyomi said as the power in her body intensified. As Tsukuyomi spoke, the power in her body intensified. Her entire body was like a volcano that was about to erupt. Zhou suddenly felt that something was amiss. He realized that blood was beginning to seep out of Tsukuyomi's eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. The power in her body was swelling as though she was about to explode. What are you trying to do? Zhou hurriedly asked. The heavenly joy token can forcefully facilitate marriage, but marriage is ultimately a matter between two people. As long as one of them dies, the heavenly joy token will naturally be useless. Tsukuyomi said. You want to self-destruct. Quick, stop. Zhou immediately shouted. The power in Tsukuyomi's body didn't show any signs of stopping. Instead, it swelled even more. It was as though moonlight seeped out of Tsukuyomi's skin, making her body as translucent as crystal jade. The energy in her surged as though she would immediately explode. I've said it before. As long as I'm around, no one can force you to do anything you don't like. Tsukuyomi's eyes were resolute, but a smile appeared on her face. She slowly said, That's all I can do for you. Take care. Chapter 1657. Moon Goddess's eyes were firm, determined, and stubborn, but deep in her eyes, there were complicated emotions such as sadness, desolation, relief, reluctance, pain, and so on. Even a person with a heart of stone would probably melt when they saw Moon Goddess's eyes. They would be shocked and touched by her sincere emotions, feeling pity for her. Furthermore, Zhou was only a little slow, not a true heart of stone. Tsukuyomi, stop. I've never said that I'm unwilling. Quickly stop. Zhou couldn't help but shout as his emotions stirred. However, Tsukuyomi didn't stop. She smiled bitterly and said, There's no need for you to force yourself. I've said it before. No one can force you to do something you don't want to do. That naturally includes me. I don't need pity, much less sympathy. Seeing that Tsukuyomi was on the verge of self-destructing, Zhou didn't have the time to persuade her. Therefore, he roared, Stop when I tell you to. Cut the crap. Don't I know what I want to do? If I let you live, live for me. If I don't let you die, you aren't allowed to die. From now on, do whatever I say. Tsukuyomi stared blankly as her eyes gradually softened. The energy fluctuations on her body finally stopped expanding, but they didn't subside either. Do you know what it means if we continue kneeling? It's not a simple ceremony. We will become real husband and wife. Are you really willing? Tsukuyomi looked at Zhou and asked in disbelief. Of course I'm willing. If I wasn't willing, I wouldn't have let you live, Zhou said with a sigh. Although it was good that he could preserve Tsukuyomi's life, it was hard to predict what the bee would do to them next. If it was really as he thought, that the bee's target was his and Tsukuyomi's offspring embryo, it would be really troublesome. All right, I'll listen to you. If you don't let me die, I won't die. Tsukuyomi's face flushed red as she said affectionately. At this moment, the two of them couldn't hold on any longer. Zhou's knees were about to touch the ground. They were only a sheet of paper away from the ground. Zhou had already resigned himself to his fate. He gave up resisting and took things one step at a time to see what the bee was up to. However, just as Zhou gave up resisting and his knee was about to touch the ground, a force erupted from his body, causing Zhou's knee that was about to touch the ground to bounce up. He immediately stood up straight. Scram! A voice sounded from Zhou's body. It sounded like the voice came from his mouth, but his mouth didn't move at all. Moreover, the voice wasn't a man's, but a woman's. As soon as he said that, little bee, who was playing the swana, was sent flying as if it had been electrocuted. It lost its grip on the swana and dropped it. The dazzling heavenly joy medallion also lost all of its luster and fell from the sky, returning to its original stone appearance. Before Zhou could react, he saw a shadow flash out of his body. It was none other than demonic neonate rushing out of his body. She caught the Suona in midair and held it by her mouth. She puffed up her cheeks and blew hard at the bee. The high-pitched sound of the Suona went straight into their souls, making everyone's heads buzz. It felt like their souls were about to be blown out of their bodies. The bee was the first to bear the brunt of the blow. It was dizzy as its body constantly spun in midair. It looked like it was in a daze. Perhaps it was because Zhou was demonic neonate's owner, or perhaps demonic neonate had deliberately not allowed the Suona's sound to affect Zhou, but regardless of the reason, Zhou wasn't affected. Without any hesitation, Zhou used the Demon Dragon King armor and borrowed the powers of the 8 companion beasts. Then, he injected all his strength into the golden WYRM scissors and sheared at the dizzy bee. Although the bee was very powerful, it was ultimately at the Heaven Realm stage. It hadn't reached the Apocalypse stage. Furthermore, it was affected by the Suona's sound and was no longer able to fight the golden WRM scissors. Furthermore, the reason why it was so strong was because of the Suona. Without it, the bee was at most about the same as the companion beast from before. It might even be inferior. Seeing that the bee was at a dead end, it suddenly flapped its wings with all its might and transformed into a stream of light to escape, hoping to make a final struggle. Zhou chased after it with the golden WYRM scissors in hand. At this moment, he naturally couldn't let the bee off. However, to his surprise, the little bee's figure flashed and landed on Tsukuyomi. It hid behind her as though it was afraid and stole a glance at demonic neonate. Then, it stabbed into Tsukuyomi's neck and transformed into a companion beast tattoo. Zhou looked at Tsukuyomi in a daze. Tsukuyomi's gentle and bashful expression gradually turned awkward. As though realizing something, Tsukuyomi's expression instantly turned pleasantly surprised. Zhou, you're just too impressive. This companion beast is afraid of you. It automatically contracted with me and became my companion beast. As expected of Tsukuyomi's husband. Zhou looked at Tsukuyomi without a word. However, Nine Yang walked over and patted Zhou on the shoulder. Zhou, it's worth it to have a woman spend so much effort to lie to you. Xiao Yi didn't say a word as he gave Tsukuyomi a thumbs up. We'll be leaving first. With that said, Xiao extended his hand and pulled Nine Yang. The two of them immediately vanished into the void, leaving only Zhou and Tsukuyomi on the dilapidated planet. Zhou now understood why a smart woman like Tsukuyomi would choose such a dangerous planet as her residence and even choose to absorb the lunar essence basin here. Zhou hadn't thought about it in detail previously, but now that he thought about it carefully, he immediately felt that there was something fishy going on. Coupled with the fact that the bee had become Tsukuyomi's companion beast at a life-and-death juncture, he was now certain that Tsukuyomi had long known about this planet. She had even begun making arrangements. It was definitely not a coincidence that she chose to live here and absorb the lunar essence basin. Their eyes met, and the atmosphere was somewhat strange. Ahem, Zhou, listen to my explanation. Tsukuyomi looked into Zhou's eyes as her face flushed red. There's no need to explain. It's good that you're fine. I should return. Zhou didn't feel angry. Tsukuyomi didn't want to harm him. Even if he really bowed to heaven and earth in the end, there wouldn't be the danger he imagined. Demonic neonate flew back to Zhou's side with the Suona in hand and transformed back into a tattoo. Even the Suona vanished. Chapter 1658. I was so close to succeeding. How infuriating. After Tsukuyomi watched Zhou teleport away, she clenched her fists in anger, but she didn't know how to vent her frustration. What's the power that repelled the parasite wasps and the life and death Suona? I seem to have heard a voice that doesn't belong to Zhou. Could it be that there's a terrifying existence hiding in Zhou's body? After calming down a little, the puzzlement in Tsukuyami's heart intensified. Thoughts constantly flashed through her mind. Why is that terrifying existence hiding in Zhou-wen's body? What's her relationship with Zhou-wen? Will it harm Zhou-wen? No, I have to think of a way to figure it out. However, on second thought, she couldn't return to Earth now. Furthermore, Zhou-wen definitely didn't trust her because of what had just happened. It would probably be difficult to resolve the problem if she went to Zhou-wen now. From the looks of it, I have to think of another solution. Tsukuyami narrowed her eyes in thought. It was unknown what she was plotting. Zhou-wen wasn't as Tsukuyami imagined. He was already a little used to Tsukuyami's style of doing things. Even though he had been deceived, he didn't feel surprised. He even felt that it was only natural. He didn't feel angry at all. Of course, this didn't mean that Zhou-wen had been fooled silly. It was just that Zhou-wen knew very well that no matter how Tsukuyami lied to him, she wouldn't really hurt him. After teleporting back to Earth, Zhou-wen returned to Guide City. As there was a certain deviation in the interstellar teleportation, Zhou-wen appeared near the ancient city. Just as he was about to return to the base, he suddenly sensed something. He turned his head to look in the direction of the city lake and saw a white-robed man standing by the lake. He had white hair and dragon horns. A gentle breeze blew over from the lake, causing his clothes to flutter. It was as though he would fly away with the wind at any moment. "Teacher!" Zhou-wen's body trembled. Although he only saw the back, he immediately recognized who it was. "Little one." The white-robed man turned around and smiled at Zhou-wen. It was none other than Wang Mingyuan. "Teacher, why are you here?" Zhou-wen was pleasantly surprised. He was happy that he could see Wang Mingyuan again, but he was also shocked that he could see Wang Mingyuan again. With Wang Mingyuan's current identity, he definitely wouldn't casually return to Earth, much less have a chat with him over tea. Zhou-wen stood there, unsure if he should run to Wang Mingyuan. He stood there in a daze. "You've grown up." Wang Mingyuan smiled and turned around again. With his back facing Zhou-wen, he looked at the ancient city shrouded in fog and said, "When you were young, there were many things you could avoid. You could choose not because there was someone standing at a high place to shelter you from the wind and rain. But as you gradually grow up, the person who protects you from the wind and rain will no longer be as tall as you are. He can no longer protect you in a world without a choice. It's time for you to make a choice. Teacher, what do you want me to choose?" Zhou-wen looked at Wang Mingyuan and ultimately didn't walk over. "The seal on Earth is getting weaker and weaker. It won't be long before all the dimensional zones will be broken," Wang Mingyuan said. "I know." Zhou-wen nodded with a heavy expression. Recently, more and more dimensional zones had been breaking through. It probably wouldn't take long for them to break through completely. When all dimensional zones are broken, it will be the time when Earth's companion beasts are born. Wang Mingyuan's words immediately made Zhou-wen's body tremble. So fast. Zhou-wen was alarmed. According to the current situation, it would probably take a year or two for the dimensional zones to be completely broken. If Earth's companion beasts were to be born, wouldn't Earth be doomed? Perhaps it's faster than you imagine. Wang Mingyuan smiled and said, "And this isn't the worst." What could be worse than this? Zhou-wen felt that his young heart couldn't withstand such a blow. Earth's destruction wasn't the worst situation. He really didn't know what could be worse. When that happens, the entire universe's suppression on the dimensional zones will be removed. In fact, the suppression of the universe's laws on the dimensional zones has already begun to weaken, Wang Mingyuan said slowly. Towards the end, the smile on his face completely vanished. "Are you sure?" Zhou-wen asked in horror. He knew very well how terrifying such a situation would be. The reason why humans could survive, or rather, why the entire universe Earth resided in could maintain a relatively peaceful state, was because of the suppression of the universe's laws on the dimensional zones. Without the suppression of these laws, all the creatures in the universe would face a huge disaster, much less humans. Wang Mingyuan didn't answer Zhou Wen as he continued, "This is a disaster, but it's also an opportunity." What opportunity? Zhou Wen didn't understand. If the dimensional zones really invaded, what chance did humans have? No one has found Earth's companion beasts, nor does anyone know which dimensional zone on Earth can decide the ownership of Earth's companion beast. Even if the top experts of the dimension descend, they wouldn't dare easily invade Earth. They still need humans as their spokesperson to vie for Earth's companion beast. Is there a need? If the dimensional apocalyptic experts can really descend to Earth in their entirety, they have the ability to open up all the dimensional zones. Why go through so much trouble? Zhou Wen frowned. They want to do that too, but unfortunately, they don't dare. They don't dare. Yes, they don't dare. Even an apocalyptic expert would be afraid. What are they afraid of? What's on Earth that makes them afraid? Zhou Wen was alarmed and puzzled. He had a vague feeling that this might be the key to everything. I don't know what's on Earth that makes them afraid. However, the former strongest expert of the dimension charged into Earth with supreme might and nearly shattered it. However, he ultimately failed to come out and vanished from the face of the Earth, Wang Mingyuan said. Is it the ship with the symbol of a woman's head? Zhou Wen immediately thought of the woman's head and the anchor. Wang Mingyuan nodded. Therefore, even if the suppression of the universe's laws vanish, the dimension won't fully invade Earth in the near future. They need some spokespeople to help them figure out what's on Earth. After a pause, Wang Mingyuan added, "There are many races in the dimension now, but there are a total of 7 truly powerful races. You shouldn't be too unfamiliar with them. The 6 holy temples represent the 6 powerful races of the dimension. However, the strongest race in the dimension isn't these 6 races, but the immortals." Zhou Wen did the math and realized that he wasn't unfamiliar with them at all. He had interacted with the Holy Land quite a number of times and had grudges with the immortals. In that case, he had offended all 7 of the strongest races in the dimension. In the future, when the dimension fully descended, he felt that his living environment would become abnormally harsh. Since the immortals are so powerful, why didn't they establish a holy temple in the Holy Land? Zhou Wen was somewhat puzzled about this. Back then, the strongest expert of the dimension that descended on Earth came from the immortals. Back then, all races submitted to the immortals. Even if the 6 holy tribes joined forces, they could only submit to the immortals. Unfortunately, the immortal who made all races submit vanished from Earth, Wang Mingyuan said slowly. Chapter 1659. Zhou Wen's hair stood on end when he heard that. Such a powerful existence had actually vanished from Earth. It was no wonder the terrifying existences of the dimension were so wary of Earth. After the immortals suffered that heavy blow, the 6 sacred clans rose and became the rulers of the dimension. Even so, the 6 races needed to join forces to suppress the heavily injured immortals. After so many years, even if the 6 sacred clans joined forces, it would be difficult for them to completely suppress the current immortals. The chances of them ruling the world again are very high. Wang Mingyuan paused for a moment before continuing. The descent of the dimension is inevitable. The various races will find their spokesperson on Earth. The immortals hope that you can become their spokesperson. If you agree, the matter of Perfect Sword Immortal and Berserk Sword Immortal can be written off. If I become the spokesperson of the immortals, wouldn't it be equivalent to helping the immortals destroy Earth? Zhou Wen said after some thought. Wang Mingyuan said with a smile, "That will depend on your heart." Zhou Wen looked at Wang Mingyuan in a daze, not understanding what he meant. Wang Mingyuan didn't explain as he took out an item and threw it at Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen caught it and saw that it was a ring that resembled ice crystal jade. You have already reached the age where you can make your own choice. Take your time to consider it. If you are willing to become the spokesperson of the immortals, crush that ring. As Wang Mingyuan spoke, His figure began to gradually become illusory, as if he was about to become transparent. Teacher, if it were you, what would you choose? Zhou Wen asked. My path might not be suitable for you. As Wang Mingyuan spoke, he finally turned around. His transparent body floated in midair as he looked at Zhou Wen with a gentle gaze. Some people choose to walk towards heaven, while others choose to walk towards hell. Regardless of where you go, you just need to follow your heart. If one day you walk towards hell, don't be afraid and don't hesitate. Reach out your hand, and there will be a hand waiting for you within your reach. Wang Mingyuan's body disappeared completely as soon as he finished his last word. Zhou Wen looked at the spot where Wang Mingyuan had vanished and didn't move for a long time. In an era when all the gods are about to descend into the mortal world, what's the difference between walking towards heaven and hell? After a long while, Zhou Wen sighed and put away the ring. After returning to Guide City, the situation wasn't good. Li Xian, Qin Zhen, Feng Qian, Ming Xiu, and company were busy fighting everywhere to maintain the base's safety. Recently, more and more breakout creatures had rushed out from the dimensional zones near Guide City. If Li Xian and company weren't top experts among humans, the base would have long been razed to the ground. Even with so many experts gathered in Guide City, there were still casualties among the ordinary citizens. Although the numbers weren't high, it was enough to make people wary. Old Zhou, you're finally back. We have to find a dimensional zone to build a city as soon as possible. There's no way to defend this crappy place, Li Xian said gloomily when he saw Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen saw that Li Xian wasn't in good spirits. His eyes were bloodshot. Even Li Xian, who had an almost undying body, looked so exhausted. The others definitely had it worse. It was time to find a dimensional zone to build a city. Is Xia Xianyue still here? Zhou Wen knew that it would be difficult to find a suitable dimensional zone to build a city in a short period of time. If push came to shove, he could only cooperate with the Xia family first. She's always here and has helped us quite a bit. Recently, breakout creatures have appeared too frequently. We really don't have enough manpower. Xia Xianyue and the Xia family have also contributed a lot, Li Xian said. Then I'll go meet her. Upon hearing Li Xian's words, Zhou Wen knew that Li Xian had tacitly agreed to cooperate with the Xia family. The Xia family was quite sincere. Recently, breakout creatures had appeared frequently. Many of the families that were originally watching had already evacuated Guide City. Xia Xianyue was still able to lead people to protect the base. The Xia family's sincerity was indeed sufficient. By the way, Sis Yuji is here. She has been of great help to us recently, Li Xian hurriedly mentioned when he saw that Zhou Wen was about to leave. Why is she here? Apart from her, who else from the Zhang family came? Zhou Wen was slightly taken aback. Others didn't know Zhang Yuji's background, but Zhou Wen knew it very well. The entire Zhang family treated Zhang Yuji like a treasure, afraid that anything would happen to her. Ignoring the fact that Guide City was a dangerous place, even in the Zhang family's dimensional zone, Zhang Yuji would have many people protecting her. It was truly beyond Zhou Wen's expectations that the Zhang family would let Zhang Yuji come to Guide City. There's also Zhang Xiao and Team White Crane. From what Sis Yuji said, it seems like the Zhang family is also interested in investing in us. Li Xian's tone suddenly turned ambiguous as he lowered his voice and said, however, I don't know if it's the Zhang family who is interested in us or if it's Sis Yuji who is interested in someone. What are you talking about? Zhou Wen glared at him in annoyance. With Sis Yuji's importance to the Zhang family, if the Zhang family isn't plotting something, why would they let her come here? Even if Sis Yuji agrees, the Zhang family wouldn't let her come. That might be what they want. Speaking of which, you aren't young anymore. Although Sis Yuji is a little older than us, she's definitely not old. A young and mature woman isn't bad either. Consider it, Li Xian said with a smile. You still have time to think about this. From the looks of it, there's no rush to build the city, Zhou Wen said indifferently. Don't. It's best you quickly find a dimensional zone to build the city. If this continues, even if I can hold on, the others will collapse, Li Xian hurriedly said. Where are Xia Xianyue and Sis Yuji now? Zhou asked after some thought. They're all at Fuyue district. We just wiped out a wave of dimensional creatures last night. They are probably resting now. Xia Xianyue and the Xia family live in Block 9. Sis Yuji and Zhang Xiao live in Block 10. Li Xian told Zhou the detailed address. Why did you arrange for them to be so close? Zhou frowned slightly. Li Xian said helplessly, I didn't arrange it. They requested it themselves. The Xia family and the Zhang family have a good relationship. They said that by living close, she can take care of them. Zhou didn't say anything else. After bidding Li Xian farewell, he headed in the direction of Fuyue district and soon arrived. After some hesitation, Zhou walked towards Block 9. He wanted to discuss dimensional zones with Xia Xianyue. Zhou. Just as he was about to reach Block 9, he heard someone call his name. He turned his head and saw Zhang Yuji standing at the entrance of Block 10, waving at him. Zhou, are you here for me? Zhou was about to turn around and walk over when he realized that Xia Xianyue had walked out of Block 9 at some point in time. She smiled and greeted him. Chapter 1660. Zhou looked at Xia Xianyue before looking at Zhang Yuji. After some thought, he said, Time is of the essence. Let's have a chat. Zhou called the two of them over and didn't enter the building. Instead, he sat down in the garden pavilion in the estate. With the Xia and Zhang families guarding outside, he wasn't afraid of anyone disturbing him. Miss Xia, you previously said that there's a suitable dimensional zone to build a city. I have the intention to cooperate, but I have to see the exact situation of the dimensional zone before deciding if I want to cooperate. Don't worry. We can sign a contract first. As long as we use the dimensional zone you provide to build a city, we won't give you a single cent less, Zhou said straightforwardly. He knew that time was of the essence. In a year or two, the dimensional zones would be completely destroyed. When the time came, if they didn't have a dimensional zone as a refuge, the hundreds of thousands of people would probably die. What's the point of signing a contract with the Federation's current situation? Xia Xianyue smiled and continued, Since I'm here, I naturally trust you. There's no need to sign any contract. I can take you there at any time. Just as Zhou was about to say something, Zhang Yuji interrupted and said, Wait, little one. Why don't you ask me first if you want to find a dimensional zone to build a city? Zhou was slightly taken aback. Sis Yuji, what do you mean? Zhang Yuji said, In terms of geomancy, which family in this world can compare to our Zhang family? Not to mention finding a place to build a city, even if you want to find a place to build a palace, I can help you find the best location. Zhang Yuji's words sounded impressive, but on second thought, Zhou realized that it made sense. The Zhang family did this. It was a difficult problem for Zhou and company, but they might really be able to solve it easily. When Xia Xianyue heard Zhang Yuji say that, she curled her lips and said, I admit that your Zhang family's geomancy is indeed unparalleled in this world. Finding a cemetery is indeed the best choice, but it's hard to say when it comes to finding a dimensional zone. Zhou, you have to think carefully. Don't use the lives of hundreds of thousands of people to verify their knowledge. What Xia Xianyue said makes sense. Even if geomancy can really deduce where there are dimensional zones, how can I deduce if that dimensional zone is suitable for building a city? Zhou thought. Zhang Yuji didn't flare up when she heard that. She continued saying indifferently, Little one, I'll take you to take a look first. See for yourself if it's suitable. Sis, what conditions does the Zhang family have? Zhou knew the principle of settling accounts clearly between brothers. Furthermore, Zhang Yuji wasn't just representing herself. She had the Zhang family's interests backing her. What conditions? This is my gift to you. Zhang Yuji smiled and said, I am me, and the Zhang family is the Zhang family. You've helped me so much in the past. Can't I give you a home? Whether or not you will cooperate with the Zhang family in the future, it has nothing to do with this matter, and I don't want you to cooperate with the Zhang family. Zhang Yuji's last sentence stunned Xia Xianyue and Zhou Wen. The first half of the sentence was easy to understand. Be it Zhang Yuji's true thoughts or her desire to befriend Zhou Wen, those words made sense. However, her last sentence didn't make sense. As a member of the Zhang family, it was difficult to understand why Zhang Yuji didn't wish for Zhou Wen to cooperate with the Zhang family. Zhou Wen originally wanted to ask why, but he held back. There were too many people here. If Zhang Yuji's answer was rather private, it wouldn't be good to ask. Zhou Wen planned on asking her in private later. However, Xia Xianyue suddenly thought of something. She glanced at Zhang Yuji and said meaningfully to Zhou Wen, Zhou Wen, the dimensional zone I plan on recommending to you is Dichio. I can guarantee that our Xia family discovered that dimensional zone first. It's not like some people who rely on their well-informed connections to do shady deals. Clearly, Xia Xianyue suspected that the Zhang family had stolen the Xia family's intelligence and wanted to use the same dimensional zone to cooperate with Zhou Wen. She didn't believe a single word Zhang Yuji had said. After all, there were so many strange dimensional zones in Guide City. How could it be so easy to find another dimensional zone that was suitable for building a city? The possibility of it being the same dimensional zone was very high. Regardless of whether the Zhang family had stolen the intelligence from the Xia family, Xia Xianyue had mentioned it first. If it was really the same dimensional zone, the Zhang family wouldn't be in a position to continue vying for it. Zhou Wen wasn't unfamiliar with the name Dichio. Legend had it that Emperor Ku of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors was buried there. Everyone believed that there should be a dimensional zone there, but no one had found one. Ignoring the fact that it was suitable for building a city, it was already very rare for the Xia family to be able to find the Dichio dimensional zone. Zhou Wen looked at Zhang Yuji, wanting to know if the dimensional zone she mentioned was Dichio. The corners of Zhang Yuji's mouth curled up slightly as she said disdainfully, Some people like to measure the heart of a gentleman with a cautious heart. Our Zhang family naturally knows about a dimensional zone like Dichio, but it's a tomb after all. Even if it's Emperor Ku's tomb, it can't change the fact that it's a tomb. That's a place for the dead. How can I let little one build a city in such a place? Wouldn't that be building a city of the dead? Oh, then I'd like to hear where the dimensional zone your Zhang family chose is, Xia Xianyue said as she stared at Zhang Yuji. Anyway, it's not Dichio. As for where it is, it has nothing to do with your Xia family. As Zhang Yuji spoke, she held Zhou Wen's hand and stood up. Let's go. I'll take you to see that dimensional zone now. As for Dichio, it's fine even if we don't go. Miss Xia, if we use Dichio to build a city in the future, the Xia family will definitely have a share. Don't worry about that. Zhou Wen explained to Xia Xianyue before he was pulled away by Zhang Yuji. After leaving the estate and arriving at an empty spot, Zhou Wen asked Zhang Yuji, Sis, where is the dimensional zone you mentioned? You'll know when we get there. Zhang Yuji blinked but didn't tell Zhou Wen the answer. All she did was pull him forward. Zhang Xiao and the members of the White Crane team protected Zhang Yuji and didn't speak to Zhou Wen. Even Zhang Xiao, who had always had a problem with Zhou Wen, didn't argue with him this time. As they walked, Zhou Wen felt that something was amiss. The path Zhang Yuji took him on was near Guide City. He had been to these places before, so he knew the dimensional zones here. There was no dimensional zone suitable for building a city. Don't tell me the dimensional zone you mentioned is here? When Zhang Yuji stopped, Zhou Wen looked at the familiar ancient city and moat in front of him and asked with an odd expression. That's right. It's Guide City's ancient city. You want to build a city. Now that the city is here, you can even save the money for building a city. Isn't I treating you very well? Zhang Yuji said with a smile. Chapter 1661. Sis, are you joking? Zhou Wen's face darkened. Others might not know, but he knew very well what kind of terrifying existence there was in the ancient city. Even though Zhou Wen could already fight Heaven Realm creatures, he still didn't dare enter the ancient city easily. Before he met the 3 conditions mentioned by the humanoid creature, Zhou Wen wasn't willing to take the risk of entering the ancient city again. Zhang Yuji said in all seriousness, "Of course I'm not joking. There's indeed an extremely terrifying existence in the ancient city. The various factions have actually been trying to probe the situation in the ancient city, but basically none of the people who entered came out alive. They don't know much about the situation inside. My family was lucky enough to know some of the situation inside. Since you know this, you should know that the ancient city can't be used as a human city." Zhou Wen looked at Zhang Yuji in puzzlement, unsure why she would make such a suggestion. "Others might not know, but have you forgotten what abilities I have?" Zhang Yuji said to Zhou Wen. "It's not good for you to use that ability, right?" Zhou Wen knew what abilities Zhang Yuji had, but Zhang Yuji wasn't willing to use them herself. Therefore, he had never thought of getting Zhang Yuji to use them to help him. "It's obviously not good if I kill my friends, but as long as I don't hurt my friends, there's naturally nothing wrong," Zhang Yuji said with a blink. "How can we build a city without killing that creature?" Zhou Wen couldn't figure out how he could occupy the ancient city without killing it. "As long as I'm here, the terrifying creature in the city will always be my friend. My friend naturally won't harm my friend. Then, can't we build a city?" Zhang Yuji said with a smile. You can't stay here forever, right?" Zhou Wen looked at Zhang Yuji in a daze and said after a while. "Why not? I came here to seek refuge with you. I won't return to Mount Dragon Tiger in the future. You won't not take me in, right?" Zhang Yuji looked very serious and didn't seem to be joking at all. "Even if you're willing, the Zhang family won't let you stay here forever, right?" Zhou Wen didn't believe that the Zhang family would let Zhang Yuji stay outside. She was the Zhang family's supreme treasure. "Why not? This is the family's decision. I will stay here in the future. I don't need to go back. I don't need to care about the Zhang family anymore," Zhang Yuji said. However, Zhou Wen still had his worries. Even if the Zhang family was willing to let Zhang Yuji stay, what if the Zhang family made Zhang Yuji leave in the future? If Zhou Wen's men entered the ancient city, wouldn't they all be doomed once Zhang Yuji left? Even if Zhang Yuji didn't leave, the Zhang family could use this as a threat. Then, wouldn't Zhou Wen be restrained by the Zhang family? No matter how Zhou Wen thought about it, he felt that the ancient city wasn't good. However, Zhang Yuji had already pulled him towards the ancient city's entrance. As they walked, she said, "I know what you're worried about. If you're willing to take me in, I'll be a part of Guide City in the future. I naturally won't abandon Guide City. Without your approval, I definitely won't leave the ancient city. Even if I wanted to leave, I'm afraid I'm already homeless." "What do you mean?" Zhou Wen was alarmed as he imagined that something had happened to the Zhang family. "Brother Chuanqiu wants me to tell you that after I enter Guide City, I can no longer treat myself as a member of the Zhang family." Zhang Yuji's expression darkened. Why? Zhou Wen didn't understand why the Zhang family was willing to release Zhang Yuji. To the Zhang family, Zhang Yuji was their most precious asset. He really couldn't figure out why the Zhang family would hand over their most precious asset to an outsider. Brother Chuanqiu said that the dimensional zones on Earth will soon be breached on a large scale. It's only going to happen in a year or two. He doesn't know how long the Zhang family can hold out, so he got me here to leave a way out for the Zhang family. If one day Mount Dragon Tiger can't hold out any longer, the Zhang family will still have a place to stay with me here. Zhang Yuji recounted what Zhang Chuanqiu had said without hiding anything. How does Zhang Chuanqiu know that I can definitely hold out? The environment here isn't much better than Mount Dragon Tiger. Zhou Wen was taken aback when he heard that. There were many myths and legends in Guide City. There were countless immortals from all walks of life. If all the dimensional zones were breached, Zhou wasn't completely confident that he could hold out. However, the Zhang family had actually deduced that all the dimensional zones on Earth were about to be breached. The timing was similar to what Wang Mingyuan had said. They were indeed capable. Brother Chuanqiu said that if there's one last human city on Earth, it will definitely be yours, Zhang Yuji said in all seriousness, mimicking Zhang Chuanqiu's tone. I never expected Zhang Chuanqiu to think so highly of me. Zhou couldn't help but smile bitterly. Stay here and wait for me. I'll go in with Zhou. Zhang Yuji got Zhang Xiao and the White Crane team to stay outside the ancient city's entrance while she pulled Zhou into the ancient city. Now, the ancient city's interior had expanded to an extremely grand scale. There were pavilions and palaces, making it look like a huge ancient capital. It was completely different from the original small city. Even Zhou, who was born here, couldn't recognize this place. Furthermore, the situation in the ancient city was somewhat strange. There was no sound in the huge ancient city. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. There were many dimensional creatures in the moat outside the city, but there wasn't a single one in the city. The silence was a little terrifying. Is that ability of yours really effective on all dimensional creatures? Will dimensional creatures that are too high-level be immune to your ability? Zhou turned to look at Zhang Yuji uneasily. This humanoid creature wasn't an ordinary dimensional creature. If Zhang Yuji's ability was useless, wouldn't that be sending her to her death? I'm not sure if my ability will be immune to high-level dimensional creatures, but up to now, there hasn't been such a situation. Even calamity creatures are no exception. Zhang Yuji was very confident in her abilities. Clearly, she had never failed. Zhou was about to say something when his gaze suddenly focused. He saw a figure slowly walking over from the central street of the ancient city. The figure had his head lowered, and his long gray hair was disheveled, almost covering his entire face. His hands seemed to be hanging by his side subconsciously. As he walked, they seemed to be broken as they swayed with his body. He didn't look like he was walking fast as he swayed, but despite walking from the end of the street, he was almost in front of them in a few steps. Has he completely lost himself? Zhou stared at the humanoid creature. He could no longer sense the human-like aura from before. Now, he was a pure dimensional creature no matter how he looked at it. Chapter 1662. Zhou subconsciously protected Zhang Yuji behind him. At the same time, he put on the Dragon King armor and borrowed the power of the 8 companion beasts, prepared to fight the humanoid creature at any moment. Don't be nervous. He won't be our enemy, Zhang Yuji said gently as she pressed down on Zhou shoulder. With that said, without waiting for Zhou to say a word, Zhang Yuji walked out from behind him and walked towards the humanoid monster. Are you sure it's okay? Zhou was still somewhat worried. He had a nagging feeling that if the invisible and intangible ability failed, it would be equivalent to sending him to his death. Zhang Yuji didn't answer. She just walked towards the humanoid monster. Her temperament seemed to have changed. The humanoid monster had clearly lost its human side and didn't remember Zhou. Its eyes shimmered with a sanguine glow, and even the hair that hung down in front of it couldn't hide the ferocious glint in its eyes. It was as though it would devour someone at any moment. The strength of his essence energy fluctuations was in no way weaker than the companion beast that had been killed by the Swana. Zhou still felt that it was too dangerous. He secretly summoned demonic neonate and got her to be prepared to attack at any moment. Although demonic neonate was only at the terror grade, her combat strength was in no way inferior to the top heavenly creatures. Furthermore, the Swana she had just snatched could blow a heavenly creature to death. She was extraordinarily strong. Come to me. Facing such a terrifying creature, Zhang Yuji spread her arms as though she was welcoming an old friend she hadn't seen in a long time. It left Zhou Wen breaking out into a cold sweat. If Zhang Yuji got too close to the humanoid creature and an accident happened, Zhou Wen might not be able to save her in time. Just as Zhou Wen was hesitating about stopping Zhang Yuji, the humanoid creature had already walked in front of her. Zhang Yuji rushed over and hugged the humanoid creature. Zhou Wen felt his scalp tingle as he looked at the humanoid creature with a ferocious glint in its eyes. He almost couldn't help but attack. Thankfully, he held back in the end. The humanoid creature was hugged by Zhang Yuji and didn't attack her. The ferocious glint in his eyes was revealed when he looked at Zhou Wen. "It's okay, I'm here." Zhang Yuji comforted the humanoid monster. That powerful and terrifying humanoid creature actually gradually became gentle, no longer as ferocious as before. Seeing that the humanoid creature slowly relaxed and quieted down, Zhang Yuji let go of him and stroked his hair with one hand. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Zhou Wen wouldn't have believed that there was such an unbelievable power in the world. Such a powerful and terrifying dimensional creature was like a child, using its head and face to rub against Zhang Yuji's palm. It's no wonder the Zhang family has always treated Zhang Yuji like a god, afraid that something would happen to her. Such an ability is practically a bug. The Zhang family has used Zhang Yuji to kill countless high-level dimensional creatures over the years. Their wealth is definitely much richer than I imagined, Zhou Wen thought. Zhou Wen was alarmed, but he never thought of using Zhang Yuji's strength to kill dimensional creatures. That was too cruel for Zhang Yuji. Although he didn't know what was going on with Zhang Yuji's ability, Zhou Wen could tell that it wasn't a simple skill. Zhang Yuji had also invested her true feelings into it. She even trusted it unconditionally, treating dimensional creatures as existences that could live and die with her. This kind of devotion was perhaps the root of Zhang Yuji's ability. Under Zhang Yuji's consolation, the humanoid creature was already a lot more docile. However, when he looked at Zhou Wen, he still revealed his ferocity from time to time, looking untamed. "Don't approach him for the time being. I need more time to spend with him. After some time, he won't be as afraid of strangers as he is now," Zhang Yuji said to Zhou Wen as she comforted the humanoid creature. Zhou Wen's heart stirred as he looked at the humanoid creature and said, "Can you communicate with him? Can you ask him some questions?" The last time the humanoid creature spoke to him, he didn't speak clearly. Zhou Wen really wanted to know what the 3 conditions the humanoid creature mentioned were. "Yes, but it will take some time. I haven't completely gained his trust," Zhang Yuji said. "Isn't that considered complete trust?" Zhou Wen saw that Zhang Yuji could already touch the humanoid monster's head. If she wanted to harm the humanoid creature, she could attack his vital spots at any time. It's not that simple. His willpower is very strong. I estimate it will take at least 10 days to half a month to make him completely trust me. When the time comes, ask whatever you want to ask, Zhang Yuji said. There's no rush. I'll look around the city first to see if there are any other dimensional creatures. I also want to see if this place is really suitable for humans to live in. Zhang Yuji was nurturing her relationship with the humanoid creature, so it was useless for Zhou Wen to stay here. Therefore, he circled the ancient city. The space inside the ancient city was extremely huge. There were palatial buildings everywhere, but there wasn't a single dimensional creature in such a huge city. In the past, there were skeleton soldiers and skeleton generals in the city, but now there was nothing. The entire city was empty. Even the interior of the buildings was empty. If nothing went wrong, this place was indeed very suitable for living. Even the houses were ready-made. One could live in them after moving in. Zhou Wen roughly estimated that the buildings in the city were more than enough for 1 million people to live in. There was also quite a lot of empty space in the city, making it pretty good for planting. Most importantly, there was a well in the ancient city. Zhou Wen tasted it and found that the water in the well was sweet and clear. It could be drunk directly. It was different from the water in the moat, so there was no need to worry about the water source. As long as the 4 city gates were closed from the inside, the creatures outside would want to barge in. It was indeed a good place that was easy to defend and difficult to attack. Of course, this place wasn't completely flawless. From the looks of it, there were no dimensional creatures in the city. If he wanted to hunt dimensional creatures, he could only go out and hunt the skeletons that crawled out of the moat. There weren't any dimensional creatures with flesh and blood nearby, so it wasn't conducive to obtaining meat. However, these problems weren't major problems. There were solutions. Now, the most important thing was to find a home for the hundreds of thousands of people. The ancient city was undoubtedly the most suitable. After all, I still have to build a city here. Zhou came to the fire god platform and looked at the stone saber inserted into the stone furnace. He didn't know what to feel. After going in circles for so long, who knew that he would return to the starting point? Luoyang Overseer's office. And Tianzhua, who was reading a document, suddenly looked up and said, "Since you're here, come in and have a cup of tea. Be it fighting or fleeing, there's no rush." As expected of Overseerin, the door didn't open, but a figure passed through it. The figure was a blurry shadow. It felt like he could see a person clearly, but no matter how carefully he looked, he couldn't tell what he looked like. "How may I address you?" And Tianzhua poured a cup of tea and pushed it in front of the figure. "You can call me Spirit Slave. I'm here to meet you, Overseer. I hope that you can become the spokesperson of our spirit race in the human world," the figure said slowly. And Tianzhua took a sip of tea and placed the teacup on the table before asking Spirit Slave, "Why should I be your spokesperson?" "The restrictions on Earth will soon be lifted. The descent of the dimension is already a foregone conclusion. The various races of the dimension are searching for a spokesperson in the human world and will provide them with large amounts of resources. It's the same for our spirit race. We will provide you with resources, Overseer," Spirit Slave said. "Then why did I choose your spirit race and not the other races?" And Tianzhua's expression remained unchanged as he continued asking. Chapter 1663. The resources the 6 sacred races have are indeed much more than our spirit race. What they can give you might not be what we, the spirit race, can give you. However, the 6 sacred races have been setting up on Earth for many years. They have long gathered countless human geniuses. Even if they think highly of you, the resources they give you are only a fraction, or even a tenth of what they have, Spirit Slave said. A large race is a large race after all. Even if it's a tenth, it might not be less than what you can give. Furthermore, as the saying goes, it's good to lean on a big tree. If I choose your spirit race, it's equivalent to fighting alone. By choosing them, not only can I obtain resources, but I can also have many helpers, right? And Tianzhua sat on a chair and placed his hands on the table as he calmly looked at Spirit Slave. "You're right. However, those sacred races might not think as highly of you as we do. It's impossible for them to meet you personally as their clan leader, much less give you guidance. This is our race's sincerity." "Your clan leader wants to meet me?" And Tianzhua revealed a look of surprise. "Yes. Although our race hasn't reached the position of a sacred race, our clan leader is a powerful existence that can be ranked in the top 10 of the alien races." Spirit Slave's voice was filled with pride. "In that case, I'll meet your clan leader who can be ranked in the top 10 of the alien races," and Tianzhua said. This time, Spirit Slave was slightly taken aback. He never expected Tianzhua to agree just like that. He swallowed the words he had prepared. "Why? Can't I meet him now?" And Tianzhua said indifferently, "Of course you can. However, with Earth's current openness, it's still a little troublesome to enter the dimension. I can only ask you to leave Earth with me first before using some means to enter the dimension, Luoyang's Li family. Li Mabai, you don't have to answer me immediately. You can take your time to consider." Li Mabai sat in front of the desk lamp. The light illuminated his shadow on the wall. The shadow was completely different from his actions and could even produce a sound. "There's no need. Take me to meet your lord of evil spirits," Li Mabai said. "What a wise choice." The shadow let out a ghostly laugh. In the next second, the desk lamp extinguished and the room turned pitch black. "North District's ultimate family clan. Lance, tell me your answer." A resplendent silhouette floated in front of Lance. Under the immense pressure, Lance's companions couldn't bear it and knelt on one knee. Their faces were all twisted and their bodies were covered in sweat. "The Divine Emperor Temple has so many holy disciples, why do they still need me? Furthermore, the person corresponding to your Divine Emperor Temple should be someone from the Cape family, right? Why don't you go to the Cape family to choose someone? Why are you looking for me?" Lance's entire body was trembling, and his legs were almost broken. However, he still forced himself not to kneel down. "There can only be one emperor in this world. Since you're here, you'll be the only emperor of our race's sacred temple." The light continued, "But everyone wants to be the emperor. If you want to be the emperor, you must constantly accept the challenges of others. If you lose, you will become a bandit. If you don't lose, those who want to be the emperor will endlessly challenge you until you die or are defeated. Tell me your choice, it doesn't matter. The key is that I like the feeling of winning all the time," Lance said seriously. In Guide Ancient City, Zhouwen had already investigated the ancient city in the past few days. Apart from the lack of dimensional creatures, it was more suitable as a human city in every aspect. The city was large enough. Not only was the city large, but many buildings also had large spaces inside. The entire city was many times larger than it looked from the outside. Furthermore, there was plenty of water here. There were many stone wells in the city, and the underground water in the wells was endless. It could be planted or farmed. As long as there was water, food was self-sufficient. The only latent danger was the stone saber on the fire god platform. If the stone saber was pulled out, it was unknown what changes would happen to the ancient city. As for the humanoid monster, it had been completely tamed by Zhang Yuji. It followed Zhang Yuji at all times like her bodyguard. However, apart from Zhang Yuji, it would have a strong desire to attack other humans. However, with Zhang Yuji around, it wouldn't really attack humans. "How is it? Have you decided? Do you want to build a city here?" Zhang Yuji asked Zhouwen with a smile. "Let's do it here," Zhouwen replied with a nod. He had already considered it very carefully over the past few days, so there was nothing to hesitate about. Upon hearing Zhouwen's answer, Zhang Yuji sighed. "From the looks of it, I've jumped from one cage to another." "This isn't a cage. This is a home," Zhouwen said. "Then I'll choose the best room in the house." Zhang Yuji smiled again. Zhouwen left the ancient city and returned to the base. Zhang Yuji and the Zhang family stayed behind in the ancient city. It wasn't that Zhang Yuji didn't want to return, but that she couldn't leave. She needed to continue nurturing her relationship with the humanoid monster, hoping to control him as much as possible to prevent any accidents from happening when a large number of humans were transferred in. Just as Zhang Yuji had said, if the city was really built, it would be very difficult for her to leave in the future. Zhouwen returned to the base and asked a few people before finding Li Xian in the meeting hall. He then realized that Feng Chuyen, Ming Xiu, and Qin Zhen were all there. "Old Zhou, you came back just in time. They've encountered some trouble. Give them some advice," Li Xian said as he pointed at Feng Chuyen and Ming Xiu. "What happened?" Zhouwen imagined that something had happened to their family when he saw that they were fine. Feng Chuyen's expression was solemn as he looked at Zhouwen and said, "Coach, a race from a dimension wants the two of us to be their spokespeople on Earth. Which clan sought you out? One of the 6 races of the Holy Temple?" Zhouwen wasn't surprised when he heard that. He had already learned from Wang Mingyuan that the seal on Earth was weakening. The terrifying existences of the dimension didn't dare to enter Earth themselves to take the risk. They would definitely find some humans to replace them to figure out what was on Earth. Feng Qiuyan and Ming Xiu were the cream of the crop among humans, so it wasn't surprising that a race from a dimension would seek them out. No, they're all races I've never heard of. The one looking for me is from some race, and the one looking for little Yan is from some phaseless race. Ming Xiu paused before continuing. They said that they will let us enter the dimension to cultivate for a period of time and give us sufficient resources and help to advance to the calamity stage. Coach, do you think we should go? Zhouwen looked at Ming Xiu before looking at Feng Qiuyan. He shook his head and sighed. The answer is already in your hearts. There's no need to ask further. If Coach needs me to stay, I'll stay, Feng Qiuyan said. I need you, but not for a short period of time. Zhouwen patted Feng Qiuyan and Ming Xiu's shoulders. Just respect your heart, but you still have to be careful. Those fellows from the dimension aren't good people. You can take advantage of them, but be careful not to suffer a loss. The base's situation is so bad now. If we leave, will the base be able to defend itself? Ming Xiu asked worriedly. Don't worry. I've already chosen a city. There's no need to build it. We can move there immediately, Zhouwen said with a smile. There were no airtight walls in the world. The news of the dimensional races choosing spokespeople among humans quickly spread in the Federation. Chapter 1664. It was unknown if it was released by the dimension itself, but soon, the entire Federation knew that the dimensional races were choosing spokespeople among humans. They could obtain the resources of the dimensional races and enter high-level worlds like the dimensional zones to cultivate. They could receive the guidance of dimensional experts. They didn't even need to sell their lives to the dimension like Saint. All they needed to do was sign a contract and help the dimensional races find something on Earth to terminate the contract. Even if the contract wasn't terminated, apart from searching for that item, the spokesperson could also reject the other requests of the dimension. There was no need to risk his life for them. Almost no one wasn't tempted by such conditions. This was more like a cooperative relationship. They didn't really need to sell their lives to the dimension to obtain all sorts of benefit. Where else could they find such a good deal? Everyone felt that it was a good thing, but the people who had been invited were watching. Very few people directly accepted the invitation. Such a good deal would more or less make people suspicious. They were afraid that the dimensional experts would tamper with the contract. Although Feng Qiuyan and Ming Xiu had already decided to head to the dimension for cultivation, they didn't immediately head there. They decided to wait for Guide City's people to move into the ancient city and everything to stabilize before heading there. This process was very smooth. There were many buildings in the ancient city to begin with, so all they needed to do was plan and distribute them. In this regard, Li Xian found the Li family's experts, and the Zhang family was a top expert in this area. After some discussion, they quickly confirmed a plan. Hundreds of thousands of people moved into the ancient city in an orderly manner. It wasn't difficult to move in. The difficult part was how to form a self-sufficient chain in the ancient city and the survival of the ancient city's residents. It was impossible for Zhouwen to provide for them for no reason. Kindness was akin to enmity, and kindness wasn't something that could be given out casually. Hundreds of thousands of people had to contribute in order to reap benefit. Otherwise, if they relied on Zhouwen to provide for them, there would definitely be chaos in the future. The quality of the hundreds of thousands of people varied. Their combat strength was basically very low, so Zhouwen didn't expect them to really fight. Those who could fight were given the opportunity to hunt dimensional creatures to exchange for resources. Those who couldn't fight were engaged in farming, business, education, and administration. These complicated planning and work were basically handled by Li Xian and the Zhang family. The Xia family was also involved, so Zhouwen wasn't willing to put his mind on it. Apart from grinding dungeons every day, Zhou spent more time on advancing his various primordial energy arts to the domain. I have to become a real calamity as soon as possible. After some thought, Zhou decided to make another trip to Luoyang. Firstly, he wanted to bring Yer back. Secondly, he wanted to make a trip to Small Buddha Temple. He wanted to see if he could find an opportunity to advance the Small Perfection of Wisdom Sutra to Calamity. The Rubik's Cube has lit up again. Another person has challenged the Star Palace dimensional zone. It's actually a human. Furthermore, he looks a little familiar. Isn't that the famous good-for-nothing from the family of gods? He, who can't do anything and doesn't learn anything. Why did he run off to challenge the Star Palace of the Rubik's Cube? Isn't he just seeking death? That's not right. How did he get in? Didn't it take 4 people to open the Rubik's Cube? Would the family of gods sacrifice 3 lives just to send He up? What's the point? It was no wonder that people were surprised. He was considered a rather famous person in the West District and even in the entire Federation. Of course, this fame wasn't a good one. Being born in a family like the family of gods, not only was He's talent and aptitude extremely poor, but he only condensed his life providence to become a legendary in his 20s. What left people even more speechless was that the life providence he condensed was extremely useless. It was called harming others without benefiting oneself. The life providence of unkillable that appeared in Gudu only meant that it couldn't kill. He's was even worse. If He were to harm others, not only would others be fine, but he would also be injured. The simplest example was He using a knife to slash at someone's neck. In the end, the person was fine, but his head was chopped off. Of course, he had never really chopped off someone's head. When he hunted dimensional creatures, he suffered a backlash. One could imagine how desperate he was when he finally condensed his life providence after more than 20 years. He had excitedly hunted dimensional creatures. Anyway, from then on, he became a joke in the family of gods. Although no one dared to say anything about he in front of the family of gods, in private, He's reputation had already spread throughout the Federation. He was famous for being a good-for-nothing. Now, he had actually ascended the magic cube and entered the Dubhe Star Palace. It was no wonder those who knew him were surprised. Everyone stared at the screen in a daze. Most people felt that He's actions were no different from suicide. Perhaps there was no need for the calamity-grade Starlord Greed to take action. Just the high temperature in the Star Palace was enough to kill He. He stood in the Star Palace with a mocking smile on his lip. In the high temperature, a strange light rose from his body. Countless lights interweaved, forming a black guardian armor around him. So he contracted a guardian. However, even if he has a guardian, what's the use of a useless life providence like his? Ignoring the fact that his guardian might not be able to defeat Starlord Greed, even if he could, would he dare to kill him? Wouldn't killing Starlord Greed be equivalent to killing himself? What is the family of gods thinking? If we send He up, isn't that sending him to his death? I think the family of gods also feels that this good-for-nothing is a disgrace to the family of gods, so they deliberately sent him to his death. While people were discussing, he had already walked towards the door of the Star Palace. He pushed the door open without hesitation and walked in. Seeing He approaching step by step, Starlord Greed finally reacted. His fist bloomed like a purple sun, and a terrifying light enveloped the entire Star Palace. Seeing the Star Palace being swallowed by the light, everyone thought that He was finished. However, in the next second, everyone's eyes widened. Boom! The light exploded, and He was still slowly walking forward in the light. However, the body of Starlord Greed, who attacked He, suddenly exploded, turning into light dust that filled the sky and finally disappeared. How could this happen? People's mouths were agape and they couldn't close them for a long time. Mo he had already passed through the teleportation array and arrived at the Jade Star Palace. He pushed open the door of the Star Palace again, and faced the mountain-like Starlord Giant Gate. Giant Gate's angry roar shook the world as his fist blasted at Mo he with supreme divine power. However, Mo he continued walking forward slowly. He didn't even look up at Giant Gate, as though he didn't take Giant Gate's fist seriously. Boom! Star-Lord Jummon's mountain-like fist smashed down, as if it could turn Mo he's tiny body into dust with just one blow. However, in the next second, Mo he stood there unscathed. Giant Gate's body exploded from head to toe like a watermelon. Everyone was dumbfounded and speechless as they watched this shocking scene in a daze. Chapter 1665. Ordinary people would only find the scene before them incredibly shocking. Unexpectedly, Mo he did not even move his hand and managed to kill 2 star venerates. He was unimaginably strong. What's more, Mo he used to be famous, and now it seemed even more unbelievable. As for some of the top human figures, they roughly guessed that Mo might have the ability to reflect damage. It shouldn't be as simple as a simple rebound. Li Xian pondered for a moment and said, "The ability to reflect damage typically consumes a certain amount of energy during the rebound process. Therefore, the strength reflected won't be greater than the user's strength. However, Mo he's situation is clearly different. The strength of his rebound is even stronger than that of the 2 star venerates." Xia Xianyue, who was also watching the battle, nodded and said, "Perhaps the rebound isn't power, but the damage itself." "That's very possible." Li Xian felt that what Xia Xianyue said made sense. Zhou Wen was also watching the battle. He felt that Mo he's strength was somewhat similar to Stellar Lord Lusen's. He thought to himself, "I wonder if Mo he will continue challenging. I wonder who is stronger, Mo he or Stellar Lord Lusen." Just as Zhou Wen was pondering over it, Mo he had already walked into the teleportation planet. The magic cube's scene changed to that of the Fecta Palace. This is interesting. Both of them need the ability to reflect the strength of others. How will they fight? Zhou Wen's interest was piqued. Back when Zhou Wen fought Star Lord Lusen, he had used the power of Human Emperor to kill Star Lord Lusen. Otherwise, any power that struck Star Lord Lusen would rebound. In the battle between Mo he and Star Monarch Lusen, if neither of them made a move and just waited for the other to injure them, it would be impossible to determine the victor. Mo he pushed open the gate of the Fecta Palace and walked toward Lu Siyuan. His attitude was no different from before, and he didn't seem to care about Lu Siyuan. Back then, Egg Sovereign, no, Immortal Thieves King only managed to reach Fecta Palace with his companion beasts. He failed to kill Stellar Lord Lutsuan. If Mo he succeeds, wouldn't he be able to rush to first place on the rankings? Even if he can't kill Lord Lusen, he has already reached the highest point that humans can reach. How did Mo he suddenly become so strong? Even if he contracted a guardian, it's impossible for him to become so strong all of a sudden, right? That's right. Furthermore, Mo he's life providence is so strange. It should be impossible for him to kill his opponent. How did he kill 2 Stellar Lords so easily? The spectators were all talking about how Mo he had become so strong. Moreover, they also wanted to know if Mo he could create a miracle by killing Star Lord Lutsuan and taking first place on the Rubik's Cube ranking. Mo he walked towards Star Lord Lusen step by step, and everyone's eyes followed his movements. Star Lord Lusen sat there without any intention of getting up. If they don't take action, it'll be an unresolvable deadlock. Just as Zhou Wen was thinking, he saw Mo he attack first. He threw a punch at Lord Lu Siyuan. Zhou Wen was slightly taken aback. This outcome was somewhat unexpected. Although he didn't know what kind of power Mo's guardian had, if his life providence hadn't changed and he had taken the initiative to kill, the wound should still have appeared on his body. Could it be that even Mo he's life providence has changed? Zhou Wen thought. Emohi's fist didn't look strong, nor did it bring with it any mysterious glow. It was just an ordinary straight punch that struck Star Lord Lucen's body. Celestial Lord Lucen had no intention of dodging. That simple and direct punch landed on his body. After Emohi's punch struck him, Star Lord Lucen was unharmed. His body didn't even sway, but Emohi had already retracted his fist. Emohi's guardian is indeed the type that reflects damage. It's just that the reflected damage is powerful. To attack his opponent himself, the strength is just too inferior. Many experts who had already guessed Emohi's strength revealed expressions that they had expected it. However, in the next second, everyone widened their eyes. The seemingly unharmed Star Lord Lucen's body suddenly turned to dust, scattering to the ground with a gust of wind. Silence. Deathly silence. No one expected such an outcome. Everyone, including Zhou, looked at the Rubik's Cube screen in surprise. Emohi, who was in the dust, was like a devil wrapped in fog. It was extremely terrifying. Even the experts of the various families were shocked. They originally thought that Emohi's protector could only reflect damage. They did not expect him to be able to instantly kill a calamity-grade star venerate with a casual punch. He was unimaginably strong. Emohi didn't stop as he walked straight to the teleportation array. Just as everyone was secretly guessing how many star palaces Emohi could break through, they realized that the screen had switched back to the Rubik's Cube ranking. Clearly, Emohi didn't continue challenging. Everyone looked at the top of the Rubik's Cube ranking. If nothing unexpected happened, Emohi's name should have appeared there. Indeed, first place had changed, but the name in first place wasn't Emohi. Fallen Races spokesperson. Many people silently recited the first name. Instantly, everyone came to a realization. They were momentarily surprised, but they also felt that it was only natural. It's no wonder the trash Emohi suddenly became so strong. He was originally the spokesperson of the dimensional races. A trash can become so strong after becoming a spokesperson. What if I become the spokesperson? What kind of race is the Fallen? I've never heard of it before. It's definitely not one of the 6 sacred races. Even a nameless race can nurture such a powerful spokesperson. If one becomes the spokesperson of the 6 sacred races, how many benefits would they receive? How strong would they become? Instantly, everyone was thinking about something. No one said a word. From the looks of it, many human geniuses will become the spokesperson of the dimensional races, Li Xian said with a twitch of his lips. Indeed, as Li Xian had said, after today's battle, everyone was discussing Emohi and the spokesperson. It was as though overnight, everyone was extremely interested in becoming the spokesperson of the dimensional races. Even the ordinary people who didn't have the qualifications to become a spokesperson were secretly hoping that the dimensional races would find them and make them experts like Emohi. After all, even a person like Emohi, who was known as trash, could become so strong. They felt that they weren't inferior to Emohi. If Emohi could do it, why couldn't they? Some of the humans who had received invitations from the dimensional races were embarrassed to let others know that they had received invitations. Now, many people took the initiative to reveal it. It was as though receiving an invitation to become a spokesperson had become a very honorable thing. Chapter 1666. Zhou didn't pay much attention to the so-called spokespersons. Earth's complete breakout was imminent. He didn't have much time left, so he didn't have the time to pay attention to such trivial matters. In an ancient building in ancient imperial city, Zhou held the mysterious phone as his eyes widened. His eyeballs were about to pop out as beads of sweat the size of beans seeped out of his forehead and dripped down his cheek. Demonic Neonate, Banana Fairy, and the other companion beasts looked at Zhou curiously as though they were watching a rare animal. They couldn't be blamed for their curiosity. Zhou had maintained this posture for 17 to 18 hours. Apart from the occasional movement of his fingers, he was like a wooden figurine. In-game, Zhou once again controlled the blood-colored avatar to enter the small Buddha temple dungeon. In the past 10 hours or so, he had repeated this action countless times. The small perfection of Wisdom Sutra came from small Buddha temple. Zhou originally wanted to attempt to condense a domain to advance to the Calamity realm in small Buddha temple. Under Zhou's control, the game screen quickly turned black every time the blood-colored avatar entered the temple. Zhou never expected that small Buddha temple, a game dungeon that he had downloaded a long time ago, would be so terrifying. The three-faced Buddha that had once taken out 3 companion eggs for him to choose from was more terrifying than any calamity-grade creature Zhou had encountered before. Instant kill. As long as Zhou didn't use the small perfection of Wisdom Sutra and used other primordial energy arts to enter the temple, the blood-colored avatar would immediately die the moment the 6 eyes of the three-faced Buddha opened. Even if he used a chaos egg that had reached the calamity grade, it could only last for an instant before it instantly exploded. Zhou was almost certain that the three-faced Buddha was at least a top-notch calamity. It was at the heaven stage of the 3 calamities of the mortal world, hell, and heavenly realm. However, this was only a guess. Zhou believed that the three-faced Buddha might even be at the more terrifying apocalypse stage. In front of the three-faced Buddha, the stronger Zhou was, the stronger the three-faced Buddha was. He didn't even have the chance to pull out the immortal culling sword. However, even if he pulled it out and slashed out, it probably wouldn't be of much use. Zhou had tried almost every method he could think of, but he was still insta-killed. Facing such a terrifying three-faced Buddha, Zhou had already given up on using this place to advance the small perfection of Wisdom Sutra to the calamity grade. The reason he kept sending himself to his death was that he realized that every time the Chaos Egg was destroyed, it would grow at an astonishing speed. In less than a day, under the constant ravaging of the three-faced Buddha, it was about to reach the threshold of the hell stage. Over the past month, Zhou hadn't left his room much. Guide Ancient City was also silently changing, but this change was like a spring sun melting into snow. It happened silently, appearing out of place compared to the earth-shattering changes in the outside world. On Earth, more and more alien spokespersons appeared. Almost every alien spokesperson would display their strength on the Rubik's Cube through the Big Dipper dimensional zone. With Mo-he as the representative, one alien spokesperson after another attacked the Big Dipper dimensional zones and appeared on the Rubik's Cube ranking. The first spot on the Rubik's Cube ranking constantly changed. The top 10 rankings often changed, and the competition was abnormally intense. Many new powerhouses were known, and those who had entered the rankings before were gradually pushed to the back. The strength of the old powerhouses was also gradually being doubted by others. The top 10 spots on the rankings were occupied by the spokespersons of the various races. Now everyone was discussing the strength of the spokespersons. Occasionally, when the veteran experts were mentioned, they were mostly discussing how far humans could go without the support of the alien races. Although a number of people firmly believed that experts like Human Emperor could fend off the alien race's spokespersons even if they didn't become spokespersons, many people were more willing to dream of being chosen by an alien race one day and becoming a spokesperson. They wanted to become powerful in a short period of time and ascend the Rubik's Cube ranking to shock the world. However, there was no such thing as reaching the heavens in a single bound in this world. Most of the people who could become spokespersons of the alien races were genius-level experts who already stood at the top of the human pyramid. Even if they were unknown spokespersons, it was only because their potential hadn't been developed before they became spokespersons. Zhou wasn't in a hurry as he watched the spokespersons ascend the rankings, but someone was even more anxious than him. Han Shinsakura, are you crazy? In the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace, an old man pointed at Han Shinsakura. His fingers trembled violently as his face flushed red. The muscles on his face twitched, clearly extremely excited. Han Shinsakura was no longer the tender youth who had followed Sei Gasakai to Luoyang to cultivate. Now, Han Shinsakura's face no longer had the youthful and impetuous look of a mature man. His calm temperament and determined eyes, as well as his sharp facial features, made him look like a lonely man. Even if a huge wave crashed against the shore, it wouldn't move him at all. "I'm not crazy," Han Shinsakura said calmly as he sat cross-legged on a mat with his swords placed on his legs. "Not crazy? Then you must be out of your mind. Wake up. Your choice determines the lives and futures of tens of thousands of disciples in the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace. Instead of going to the 6 families, you actually want to go to guide Ancient City? Do you know what's going on outside? It's the era of spokespersons now. Even the Zhang and Dugu families, who have always been determined to fight to the death with the alien races, have already accepted the existence of spokespersons. They are doing everything possible to make their disciples become spokespersons. What's in Guide Ancient City? I can tell you with certainty that there's not even a single spokesperson there. You ignored the generous offers from the 6 families and insisted on going to Guide Ancient City. If this isn't crazy, what is? The more the elder spoke, the angrier he became. He wished he could slap Han Shinsakura awake. "Zhouwen is there." Han Shinsakura's expression didn't change as he said calmly. "Zhouwen? No matter how strong Zhouwen is, he's not a spokesperson. What future can he have? Ignoring Zhouwen's Guide Ancient City, even the family in Luoyang that he relies on doesn't have a spokesperson. It will be annexed by others sooner or later. When that happens, we won't even have the right to negotiate with the 6 families. We might even end up as cannon fodder. You are joking with the lives of tens of thousands of disciples of the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace. I absolutely won't agree. The elders will definitely not agree either." When the elder said that, the few elders standing beside him nodded silently, expressing their support for the elder's opinion. As the dimensional zones overseas became more and more severe, it was difficult for ordinary cultivators to survive at sea. The Nitin Flying Immortal Palace had no choice but to consider returning to the mainland. Otherwise, it would probably be destroyed in the near future. However, on the question of where to go after returning to the mainland, the current Palace Lord of the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace, Han Shinsakura, and the elders had a huge disagreement. The 6 families had once contacted the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace and expressed their willingness to accept them. They had also offered rather good conditions. The few elders were inclined to choose between the 6 families, but the current Palace Lord, Han Shinsakura, insisted on going to Guide Ancient City. Chapter 1667. It's my decision to head to Guide Ancient City. It's also an order. I'm not discussing it with you, Han Shinsakura said calmly. His tone was extremely calm, but it was as if a barrel of gasoline had been ignited. It wasn't just the elder who had argued with Han Shinsakura. The other elders also revealed looks of indignation. All of them spoke up. Some cursed, some persuaded, and some gave Han Shinsakura pointers as a senior. The meaning behind their words was to tell Han Shinsakura not to be stubborn. Otherwise, it would definitely harm the tens of thousands of disciples of the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace. It might even destroy the foundation that Sei Gasakai had painstakingly established. Looking at the elders who were spitting saliva, Han Shinsakura was just about to say something when he suddenly saw a female swordsman in white walk in. Hence, he shut his mouth and looked at the female swordsman. "Elders, can you listen to me?" the female swordsman said to the elders. "Shiraishi Satomi, you came just in time. Quickly persuade your senior brother. He's going to ruin the foundation that Lord Sword Sage has painstakingly established." When the elders saw the female swordsman, their eyes immediately lit up. They invited her to join their camp and persuade Han Shinsakura. Sei Gasakai had many disciples, but only Han Shinsakura and Shiraishi Satomi could truly obtain his teachings. Although Han Shinsakura had inherited the position of palatial lord, Shiraishi Satomi's status in the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace was still very high. She had a good relationship with Han Shinsakura, so Han Shinsakura would likely consider her words more seriously. Elders, palatial lord's decision is right. We should head to guide ancient city, and not the 6 families. Shiraishi Satomi's words left all the elders dumbfounded. Shiraishi Satomi, why are you going crazy with palatial lord? The elders looked at Shiraishi Satomi in puzzlement. I'm not crazy. Palatial lord isn't crazy either. Guide ancient city is our best choice, not the 6 families, Shiraishi Satomi said firmly. Why? The elders were even more puzzled. They really couldn't think of any reason not to choose the 6 families and instead choose a tiny guide ancient city that was under the family. Because Zhou is there. When she said this, Shiraishi Satomi's eyes seemed to shimmer. The elders were stunned. This was the second time they had heard that sentence today. First, Han Shinsakura had given such an answer, and now Shiraishi Satomi had given the same answer. The 2 mainstays of the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace had given such an answer. It was truly unbelievable. Zhou is indeed a figure. There are rumors in the outside world that he's the Thief King. Ignoring the fact that he might not be the Thief King, even if he really is the Thief King, not being chosen by the dimension only proves that his potential is limited. It's not worth it for us to bet the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace's foundation on him. An elder persuaded. Third elder is right. Besides, what sort of place is Guide Ancient City? The strange dimensional zones were everywhere, and the environment was no better than at sea. In fact, it was even more terrifying. In the future, the dimensional zones would be breached on a large scale, and the situation would be even more difficult than at sea. Isn't it the same as entering the tiger's den after leaving the wolf's den? Absolutely not. Even if we are considering going to guide ancient city, we should directly contact the family in Luoyang. Wouldn't we be lowering ourselves to guide ancient city just like that? Guide ancient city is definitely not a good place. The elders began to persuade Shiraishi Satomi again. No matter how good the relationship between Shiraishi Satomi, Han Shinsakura, and Zhou was, they didn't believe that it was a place worth betting the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace's foundation. What if Zhou is human emperor? Shiraishi Satomi suddenly said. The elders who were spitting saliva fell silent as they stared at Shiraishi Satomi as though they were frozen. They even forgot to close their mouth. What did you just say? An elder felt that he must have heard wrongly as he asked Shiraishi Satomi. If Zhou is human emperor, is it worth entrusting him to us? Shiraishi Satomi asked. Shiraishi Satomi, don't spout nonsense just to convince us. When human emperor killed Ditian, Zhou wasn't even 20. He wasn't even fully grown. How can he be human emperor? That's right. Zhou can't be human emperor. Don't think that you can fool us and make us agree to go to guide ancient city. Even if Zhou is really human emperor, he hasn't been chosen by the dimension. It's still unknown if he can fight the spokesperson. Furthermore, it's difficult for 2 fists to fight 4 hands. Shiraishi Satomi was taken aback. She originally imagined that as long as she told the elders the secret that Zhou was human emperor, she would definitely obtain their support, but she never expected such an outcome. Shiraishi Satomi was momentarily at a loss for words as she looked at Han Shinsakura with a bitter smile. Han Shinsakura had long guessed that this would happen, so he hadn't revealed the secret that Zhou was human emperor. Firstly, it was useless, and secondly, it could easily cause trouble for Zhou. Elders, do you know why the sword Dao created by my master is called the Nitin Flying Immortal Ryu, and why our place is called the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace? Han Shinsakura said slowly when he saw Shiraishi Satomi's pleading gaze. Sword Sage once said that he received guidance from an expert, which is why he was able to create the Nitin Flying Immortal Ryu. As for why it's called the Nitin Flying Immortal Ryu, he didn't say. An elder said after some thought. The Nitin Flying Immortal Palace didn't discriminate in education. Most of its disciples were actually recruited from other factions. There weren't many disciples who were truly taught by Sei Gasakai. Especially in recent years, as the living environment overseas was getting worse, many small factions had joined the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace in hopes of obtaining Sei Gasakai's protection. Most of these elders were lords of a faction in the past, not Sei Gasakai's fellow disciples. You're right. Master did receive guidance from an expert to create the Nitin Flying Immortal Ryu. Back then, I was only a teenager. I followed Master to the mainland to cultivate and met a peerless expert in Luoyang's peony garden, Han Shinsakura said. I know about this. It was before the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace was established. Lord Sword Sage had traveled to the mainland. At that time, Lord Sword Sage had already reached a bottleneck in his sword Dao. He was only half a step away from creating the Nitin Flying Immortal Ryu sword Dao. As he encountered that expert and was defeated, he gained some insight. After returning, he created the Nitin Flying Immortal Ryu. Palace Lord, you should be talking about that time, right? The yellow-faced elder recalled. Han Shinsakura nodded slightly. That's right. Do you know who the person Master and I met was? Naturally, it's a highly respected senior, the yellow-faced elder said. What if I say that the person we met was only a 15 or 16-year-old youth who was about the same age as me? Han Shinsakura's gaze swept across everyone's faces as he enunciated each word. Impossible! The elders shouted in unison. They naturally refused to believe such a thing. A 15-year-old youth had defeated Sei Gasakai, who was already a half-step sword sage back then. This was simply a fantasy. Why is it impossible? A voice sounded from outside. Everyone was overjoyed when they heard the voice. They looked out the door and saw Sei Gasakai slowly walking in. Chapter 1668. Lord Sword Sage. Master, the group of elders, Han Shinsakura, Shiraishi Satomi, and company stood up and bowed. Although Sei Gasakai had already passed the position of Nitin Flying Immortal Palace's palatial lord to Han Shinsakura, just the name Sei Gasakai held extremely high prestige in the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace and even overseas. Lord Sword Sage, you have to take care of this matter. You can't watch the palatial lord lead the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace onto a path of no return because of his own selfishness. The few elders hurriedly recounted Han Shinsakura's decision to lead the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace to guide ancient city to Sei Gasakai, who had just returned. Sei Gasakai waved his hand to stop the elders from continuing. Then, he said, Sakura is the palace lord of the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace. He has the right to make any decision. But the elders were anxious. They wanted to argue, but they were stopped by Sei Gasakai. Sei Gasakai looked at the elders and said indifferently, Furthermore, I also believe that Sakura's decision is correct. Joining Guide Ancient City is far more correct than joining the 6 families. The elders never expected Sei Gasakai to say that. They were momentarily dumbfounded, unsure of what to say. Sei Gasakai continued, Just as Sakura said, back when we traveled to Luoyang, I was filled with ambition. I believed that my sword Dao was enough to challenge Sunset College's Lingzongjing, but not long after I arrived in Luoyang, I encountered Zhouwen. Back then, Zhouwen was only 15 or 16 years old, but I lost to him. The reason why the sword Dao I created is called the Nitin Flying Immortal Ryu is because this sword Dao was gained from Zhouwen's transcendent flying immortal. It can be said that Zhouwen is my master. If these elders hadn't believed Han Shinsakura's words, they no longer had any doubts after hearing Sei Gasakai say it personally. All of them were tongue-tied, unable to say a word. Zhouwen has extraordinary talent. With a pure human body, he has cultivated to an unparalleled realm. He's definitely not someone who relies on external forces to raise his strength in a short period of time. He will definitely shock the world in the future. Furthermore, there are many people under the 6 families. If we go now, we will only be one of them. Guide Ancient City was in need of manpower, so it was a good opportunity to head there. Sakura's thoughts are all for the sake of the Nitin flying immortal palace. She's not selfish at all. Everyone, don't be suspicious. Sei Gasakai swept his gaze across the elders' faces. The elders could not help but lower their heads. We will listen to Palace Lord's instructions. The elders turned around and bowed to Han Shinsakura. Han Shinsakura's expression remained unchanged. There were no ripples in his eyes. He still didn't take what had just happened to heart. His gaze was distant, as if the focus of his gaze was no longer in front of him. Zhou, I'm coming. My sword will surprise you. Don't disappoint me. Achoo! Zhou, who was gaming on his phone, sneezed. After rubbing his nose, he continued focusing on the game. In the game, the blood-colored avatar's entire body was enveloped by the crystal-like chaos egg. As for the golden light that shot out from the 3-faced Buddha's eyes in the temple hall, it enveloped the entire chaos egg. The golden light penetrated the chaos egg and dyed it golden. Now, the chaos egg had reached the peak of the hell stage and was almost about to break through to the heaven stage. When the chaos egg at the mortal stage was being beaten, it could convert the enemy's strength into essence energy crystals. Furthermore, essence energy crystals could be stacked. At most, 10,000 essence crystals could be stacked into one essence crystal. The chaos egg at the hell stage had an even greater increase in this stacking ability. The highest number of stacks reached 100 million before it couldn't be increased any further. With the chaos egg's current essence energy capacity, it could only last less than 20 seconds under the 3-faced Buddha's golden light. Furthermore, no matter how the chaos egg was destroyed, it couldn't grow like before. Zhou clearly felt that the chaos egg was just a little short of breaking through to the heaven stage, but for some reason, he felt that something was missing. It was difficult for him to truly enter the heaven stage. What exactly is missing? Seeing the game screen turn black again, he still didn't gain anything. The chaos egg didn't grow at all. He couldn't help but frown in thought. Zhou now knew very well that it was impossible to help the chaos egg advance to the heaven stage by relying on mechanical suicidal cultivation. He had to figure out the key to advancing. I'm hungry. As Zhou was pondering, demonic neonate walked to Zhou side with the demonic sword in her arms. She looked up into Zhou eyes and said seriously, "Hungry?" Zhou was first taken aback. After snapping to his senses, he sized up demonic neonate in surprise. Many companion beasts would be hungry. If they were hungry for too long, they might even dissipate. The most typical example was Tyrant Behemoth. If there was no food for an extended period of time, Tyrant Behemoth might starve to death. It was only because Zhou had the resources in the game dungeons and an essence energy art like the Chaos Egg that could convert essence energy crystals that he could nurture so many high-level companion beasts. If it were any ordinary person, most of them would starve to death even if they were given a bunch of mythical pet. However, demonic neonate was different. She was very picky. There were very few food that caught her eye. Even high-level essence crystals were beneath her notice. Even calamity-grade companion eggs were beneath demonic neonate. It could be said that demonic neonate ate the least among Zhou top companion beasts. Every time she ate, she would eat some strange things. She usually didn't eat, nor had he heard her say that she was hungry. Now that demonic neonate had taken the initiative to say that she was hungry, Zhou jumped in fright. This was because he didn't know if he had anything demonic neonate wanted to eat. After carefully sizing up demonic neonate, she still looked the same. She looked like a cute and cold spellswordsman girl. She wasn't much different from usual, but after taking a careful look, Zhou realized that demonic neonate was indeed different. Demonic neonate's pupils usually looked black, but in fact they weren't black. They were an extremely deep purple color, so thick that it made people mistake them for black. However, demonic neonate's pupils had become very faint, turning into a grayish-purple color. The grayish-purple color gave off a feeling of decline and loneliness. If one looked at it for too long, they would feel as though they would be sucked in. Little neonate, what do you want to eat? Zhou took out the high-level companion eggs, essence energy crystals, and origins he had collected and placed them on the bed for demonic neonate to choose. Demonic neonate swept her gaze across the items, but she only shook her head slightly. Zhou took out many more items, but they were similarly rejected by demonic neonate. Could it be that I can only use little neonate's food reserves? Zhou rummaged through his belongings, but he didn't find anything that demonic neonate wanted to eat. He couldn't help but think of Grim Demon. When demonic neonate saw Zhou eyes darting around her demonic sword, she immediately understood what Zhou was thinking. She shook her head and said, "It's not enough." Unfortunately, Grim Demon couldn't sense the situation outside without unsheathing the demonic sword. Otherwise, he would probably fight Zhou to the death. End of this chapter. Chapter 1669. My dear Grandaunt, you aren't eating anything. You will starve to death sooner or later if you are so picky. Zhou was depressed, but he didn't say that to demonic neonate. Instead, he thought about it. Little neonate, do you have anything you want to eat? Zhou squatted in front of demonic neonate and asked as he stroked her head. Demonic neonate thought for a moment before turning to walk out. Zhou hurriedly followed. It had been days since he went out, so he found the sunlight a little blinding when he walked out of the room. Zhou lived in a courtyard house in the northwest corner of the ancient city. Such courtyards were everywhere in Guide Ancient City, so they weren't eye-catching. In fact, there were many courtyards that were bigger than this one. As the current owner of the ancient city, Zhou could have chosen a better place. The reason he didn't do so was because this seemingly inconspicuous courtyard house actually had something strange about it. Every building in the ancient city was almost an independent space. Zhou had already explored most of the buildings, and there were only a few places he hadn't found a way to enter. For example, the town god's temple, the bell tower, and some strange large courtyards. He temporarily couldn't find a way to enter them. Although he could enter this small courtyard, there were some strange things that Zhou still couldn't figure out. On the one hand, he lived here to explore the secrets of the small courtyard, and on the other hand, he was afraid that something would happen here. If something really happened, he could suppress it in time. The courtyard wasn't big, and the building itself wasn't anything special. However, there was a well in the courtyard. On special days, he could hear the sound of bubbling water coming from the well. The sound of water in the well sounded very normal. It wasn't strange for wells with flowing water or underground springs to have water sound. In fact, it wouldn't be strange even if a dimensional creature produced sounds in the well. The strange thing about this well was that there was no water in it. It was strange to hear the sound of water in the middle of the night. Zhou had once sent his companion beasts down to explore, but they didn't discover anything. The ancient well wasn't deep to begin with, so Zhou could see to the bottom at a glance. The bottom was dry soil that had been there for years. There was no moisture at all, much less water. Every time there was the sound of water, Zhou would look down the well, but the outcome was the same. All he could see was the soil at the bottom of the well, but not a single trace of water. However, the sound of gushing water was clear in his ears. It wasn't just Zhou. Anyone who walked into the yard could hear it. Zhou had once dug the bottom of the well, but no matter how deep he dug, he didn't discover anything. Furthermore, the soil that was dug out would disappear after a period of time. The hole in the well would return to its original state as though it had never been touched. How could Zhou be at ease with such a strange ancient well in such a manner? All he could do was stay here. If anything happened, he could deal with it in time. However, after such a long period of time, although the ancient well would often produce the sound of water in the middle of the night, there were no other abnormalities. Therefore, Zhou hadn't deliberately studied the ancient well recently. After the demonic infant came out of the house, she came to the side of the ancient well and jumped onto the edge of the well. She stretched her head out and looked into the ancient well. After looking at it for a while, the demonic infant looked up at Zhou. She held the demonic sword in one hand and pointed into the ancient well. At the same time, she said, "Down. There's nothing at the bottom of this ancient well. I dug more than 1,000 meters deep, but I didn't see anything." As Zhou spoke, he came to the side of the ancient well and looked inside. He knew that the demonic infant wouldn't speak without reason. Just like before, he could see the bottom of the well at a glance. There was nothing down there. The demonic infant looked down at the well again. After a while, she suddenly said, "The thing is down there." "Where is it?" Zhou focused his gaze and even summoned Dr. Darkness to fuse with him. He used his eyes of penetration to look down, but he still didn't see anything. The demonic infant frowned in thought, as though she didn't know how to explain. After some thought, she suddenly reached out and plucked the Swona from her waist. Typical companion beasts didn't know how to use weapons. Even if some companion beasts used weapons, they were connate companion weapons. However, demonic infant was different. The weapons on her were basically snatched from others. The demonic sword, heaven shrouding bell, and Swona were all snatched. However, apart from the demonic sword, demonic infant rarely used the heaven shrouding bell and Swona. Demonic infant placed the Swona in front of her tiny mouth and puffed her cheek. She was about to blow the Swona. "Don't blow." Zhou jumped in fright as he hurriedly reached out to hug demonic infant. With his other hand, he covered her tiny mouth to prevent her from blowing out the air. The moment the Swona sounded, it was either joy or sorrow. Zhou could withstand the Swona's magic, but the many ordinary people in Guide Ancient City probably couldn't. It wouldn't be good if the entire city was in mourning. With Zhou covering demonic infant's mouth, she couldn't breathe out. Her cheeks puffed up as her eyes widened. She reached out to pull away the hand that covered her mouth and exhaled. She stared at Zhou and said, "Don't blow. The thing down there won't come out." "What's down there?" Zhou really couldn't tell what was down there. He was truly curious as he stared into demonic infant's eyes and asked. "Food," demonic infant answered with certainty. "What kind of food?" Zhou nearly vomited a mouthful of blood. All he could do was patiently continue asking. "I don't know. It's just food," demonic infant answered very straightforwardly. Zhou was depressed, but he knew that he couldn't get anything out of her. He pointed at the Swona in demonic infant's tiny hand and said, "You can blow this thing, but is there any way to prevent its sound from affecting the others in the city?" "Sure." Demonic infant tilted her head and thought for a moment before nodding. Zhou heaved a sigh of relief and released demonic infant. "Keep blowing. I also want to know what's in this ancient well." Demonic infant placed the Swona by her lips again and puffed up her cheeks to blow into it. The resounding Swona's sound was earth-shattering. It penetrated deep into one's soul as though it wanted to take away one's soul. Plop! Zhouwen's legs went limp as he knelt to the ground. His eyes were like pearls as they fell out one after another. "Holy sh*t, didn't you say that it wouldn't affect others?" Zhouwen's words turned into a sobbing tone. He struggled to stand up, but he couldn't. "There's no one else here." Demonic infant's voice sounded in Zhouwen's mind as she continued blowing the Swona. The demonic and desolate sound constantly entered Zhouwen's ears, causing his tears to constantly fall. The number of tears he had shed in his life was more than what he had just shed. Zhou was just about to say something when he heard the sound of water surging from the ancient well. The sound of water in the ancient well typically sounded at night. This was the first time it had appeared in broad daylight. Chapter 1670. The demonic infant puffed up her cheeks and played the suona with all her might. Her face turned red from all the blowing, and fine beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. The sound of water gurgling in the ancient well was like the sound of a boiling fire. But other than that, there was nothing unusual. Zhou cried miserably by the side. His tears flowed like a trickling stream, and his eyes were bloodshot. He cried so hard that tears of blood were about to flow out. Damn it! If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have stayed in this yard. I was too careless. Zhou was depressed. If he had known this would happen, he would have at least made some preparations. Originally, Zhou had relied on the sigh of the king to prevent him from kneeling. It had a natural restraining effect on the suona's sound, but to his surprise, the sigh of the king didn't react at all. It caught Zhou off guard. It was too late for him to resist after he fell for it. He pressed his hands to the ground, trying his best to prevent his head from touching the ground. Zhou cried as blood seeped out from the corners of his eyes. However, the ancient well remained silent. Nothing came out. "Little neonate, why don't we try again another day?" Zhou cried as he shouted at demonic neonate. He really couldn't hold on any longer as his forehead was about to touch the ground. At that moment, the ancient well suddenly emitted a bright light. It was as though the well had turned into a huge searchlight. Light spewed out from the well, and after rising several meters high, it scattered like a fountain. Zhou hurriedly held his breath and focused. He circulated all his strength to resist the sound and used Truth Listener's ability to observe the abnormal changes in the ancient well. The water in the ancient well seemed to surge as waves surged out. Soon, Zhou discovered that something was slowly floating out of the rising light that resembled a spring. "That's a skeleton." Zhou was alarmed to discover that a skull first floated out of the light, followed by a skeleton in tattered clothes. Not long after, a complete skeleton floated at the top of the spring-like light. The skeleton maintained a cross-legged posture, its body covered in tattered linen clothes. Its entire body had long since decayed to the point where there was not a single bit of flesh left, but a head of white hair still grew on top of the skull. Hair was supposed to grow on the scalp, and the skull's scalp was long gone. Even if the hair hadn't decayed, it should have fallen off. However, the white hair on the skull was silver and shiny, and there were no signs of it falling off. In addition, there was a necklace around the skeleton's neck that was very eye-catching. It was a necklace made of black metal. The pendant was in the shape of a demon's eye, and in the middle of the demon's pupil was a purple round crystal. Although Zhou was using Truth Listener to listen to the scene, for some reason, he felt that the devil's eye seemed to be staring at him. Apart from that, the skeleton's left hand was still tightly clenched. From the gaps in its fingers, he could see something clenched, but most of it was blocked by the skeleton's hand. He couldn't tell what it was. He could only see through the gaps that it was a small white object. Just as Zhou was still sizing it up, the sound of the suona suddenly stopped. Demonic neonate's figure flashed and appeared in front of the skeleton. The sheathed demonic sword in her hand stabbed at the devil's eye necklace around the skeleton's neck. The tip of the sword was aimed at the purple pupil crystal. Clang! The demonic sword collided with the pendant with a crisp sound. The purple crystal emitted a purple light that resembled a black hole, blocking the demonic sword, preventing it from advancing. Demonic neonate was already exhausted from playing the suona. At that moment, she unleashed all her strength, causing her body to tremble slightly due to the exhaustion. She gritted her white teeth tightly as her chubby face turned purplish red. Zhou was really afraid that she would shatter all her teeth if she used too much strength. She wouldn't be as cute without her teeth. Zhou didn't know why he could still think so much at such a time. "Help me!" Only when demonic neonate squeezed out 2 words from between her teeth did he react. He immediately leaped up from the ground and summoned the immortal culling sword. He held the sword hilt and condensed the power of immortal slaying. He suddenly pulled the immortal culling sword out of its scabbard and slashed at the necklace on the skeleton's neck. With the power of the immortal culling sword and Zhou Wen's present strength, even a powerful calamity-grade lifeform couldn't ignore this slash. However, for some reason, Zhou Wen felt that this slash would fail. In an instant, it arrived in front of the skeleton. Just as the immortal culling sword was about to strike the necklace suddenly cracked and slid off the skeleton's neck. Zhou Wen was immediately taken aback as he forcefully stopped the immortal culling sword in his hand from slashing down. An inexplicable palpitation surged in his heart. This palpitation made him subconsciously do so, as though something bad would happen if he really slashed down. Thankfully, Zhou Wen already had some control over the immortal culling sword. If it were like before, he wouldn't have been able to retract it even if he wanted to. The blade finally stopped a few nanometers away from the skeleton's neck. As the necklace slowly slid down, the light in the ancient well dimmed. Zhou Wen could clearly see that the necklace wasn't really broken. Instead, the clasp on the necklace had opened on its own, causing it to slide down. After the necklace left the skeleton's neck, the purple light on the demon eye converged. The demon sword had shattered the demon eye pendant, and the purple crystal that was the pupil fell out. The demonic infant pouted and sucked the purple crystal in the air. She directly sucked the purple crystal into her mouth and swallowed it with a gulp. The entire process was completed in one go. Zhou Wen didn't even have the time to size up the purple crystal. The necklace that had been sliced off by demonic neonate fell to the ground. The light in the ancient well completely converged as the skeleton fell as well. Its silver-white hair quickly withered and dissipated. The entire skeleton's body rapidly disintegrated, turning into ashes that scattered in all directions. The dust that fell vanished without a trace before it even touched the ground. Thud! Something fell to the ground. It was the white object in the skeleton's hand. It was a square metal object slightly larger than a matchbox. On one of the faces of the metal object, there was a white line connected to it like a tiny tail. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but Zhou Wen had a nagging feeling that when the skeleton dissipated, it had let go of its hand, allowing the metal object to fall. Zhou Wen looked at the white object, and as he watched, his eyes gradually widened as though he had discovered something unbelievable. End of this chapter. Chapter 1671. Just as demonic neonate swallowed the purple crystal, its grayish-purple pupils immediately deepened in color. Moments later, they turned dark purple. Before Zhou Wen could size it up carefully, demonic neonate automatically transformed into a dark beam of light and returned to Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen sensed that demonic neonate's consciousness was gradually turning blurry. He had experienced this many times before. It was a sign that she was about to evolve. He reached out to pick up the white object on the ground and held it in his hand to observe it. Zhou Wen had definitely never seen this before, but the material of its shell was almost identical to his mysterious phone. Be it color or texture, there was no difference. Zhou Wen took out the mysterious phone and wanted to compare it to see if the two were really made of the same material. To his surprise, just as the mysterious phone touched the white object's line seemed to be attracted by a magnet as it was sucked to the end of the mysterious phone. The mysterious phone's screen automatically lit up, showing a charging battery. Zhou Wen was momentarily speechless as he looked in the direction of the ancient well. His expression kept changing as countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Ever since he obtained the mysterious phone, he had never charged it. The mysterious phone didn't need to be charged, nor did it have a charging port. But now it was being charged. The battery icon on the screen also showed the battery percentage. It only had 1% left. Zhou Wen didn't know the difference between the mysterious phone being charged and not being charged, but that wasn't what he was most concerned about. Zhou Wen's father had explained the origins of the phone very clearly. It was dug out from an ancient well in Guide Ancient City by Zhou Wen's grandfather, but Zhou Wen's father wasn't too sure which ancient well it was. Looking at the current situation, that thing was clearly something that came with the phone. It was most likely something like a power bank. Could it be that the mysterious phone was dug out from this ancient well? Countless thoughts flashed through Zhou Wen's mind as he looked at the charging phone. His expression turned even more complicated. He thought of a possibility. If the mysterious phone was really dug out from this ancient well, then could the skeleton just now be the remains of his grandfather? Zhou Wen had seen the power of the necklace with his own eyes. Even with demonic neonate's strength, it was difficult for her to injure it at all. Zhou Wen roughly estimated that his strike probably couldn't damage the necklace, but when he approached it, the necklace automatically opened. Also, when the skeleton dissipated, it seemed like it had let go of its hand, causing the charger to fall. Also, when he was about to chop down, his heart palpitated. These abnormal situations made Zhou Wen suspect that the skeleton had done it deliberately. If the skeleton was really Zhou Wen's grandfather's remains, everything could be explained. However, Zhou Wen recalled that his grandfather hadn't gone missing, nor had he been buried. He had been cremated when he passed away. The young Zhou Wen had even attended the funeral, so it was unlikely that his remains had been left behind. What's going on? Zhou Wen couldn't figure it out no matter how he thought about it. The skeleton had already dissipated, so it was impossible to find any clues. Looking at the phone that was charging, Zhou Wen had no choice but to wait for the time being. He wanted to see what would happen after the phone was charged. Perhaps there would be clues when the time came. Is it not just a coincidence that the mysterious phone was dug out from the ancient city? Seeing that the battery had just jumped from 1% to 2%, Zhou Wen picked up the phone and tried to operate it. He realized that the phone couldn't be operated at all. It was stuck at the charging screen. "Old Zhou, what are you doing?" Li Xian shouted as he pushed the door open and walked in. There had been many things happening in Guide Ancient City recently. Zhou Wen had been a hands-off manager, so most of the work was coordinated by Li Xian. "When did you come?" Zhou Wen asked Li Xian. "I just arrived." "What's wrong?" Li Xian looked at Zhou Wen in puzzlement. "Did you hear anything or see anything?" Zhou Wen asked again. "Say, are you in this yard? Did a spy barge in?" "I didn't hear or see anything." Li Xian immediately sized up the yard warily, but he didn't discover anything. "No, didn't you see a light rush out from this ancient well?" Zhou Wen recounted the appearance of the skeleton, but he didn't mention the charger. It was difficult to explain. "According to what you said, I should have seen it from afar, but I didn't see anything just now. This Guide Ancient City is indeed a little odd. I wonder if it's a blessing or a curse for us to occupy this place. I hope nothing bad happens." Li Xian paused for a moment before continuing. "There's something I need to discuss with you. Overseas' Nitin Flying Immortal Palace has contacted us. They want to move to our Guide Ancient City. What do you think?" Zhou Wen thought for a moment before recalling Sei Gasakai. After some thought, he said, "Although the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace established by Sei Gasakai is an overseas faction, it hasn't had much conflict with inland. It can be considered to have maintained its neutrality. Furthermore, in this era, be it overseas or inland, they are all part of humanity. We are in need of manpower now. If there's no grudge, there's no harm in taking them in." "I think so too, but there's still a small problem," Li Xian said with a smile. "What small problem?" Zhou Wen asked with a frown. "Nitin Flying Immortal Palace wanted to move inland some time ago. The 6 families and some large factions are very interested in them. They have also come into contact with them and offered pretty good conditions. Even I was tempted when I heard those conditions, but for some reason, they rejected all of them. Furthermore, they took the initiative to contact us and wanted to move to our place. The conditions they raised were far inferior to the conditions given by the 6 families." Li Xian paused to give Zhou Wen some time to digest the information. Are you suspecting their motives? Zhou Wen asked. A little, but that's not the most important thing. Most importantly, the family clan of gods seems determined to obtain the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace. Not only did they actively contact the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace again, but they also offered better conditions. They even used their connections to tactfully express their hope that we can reject the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace. Li Xian recounted the entire matter. Who did they find? Zhou Wen asked after some thought. Your family. Li Xian didn't say it directly. The Yin family? Zhou Wen was slightly taken aback. Yes, but Brother Xing contacted me and said that there's no need to worry too much. If there's a need, just take in the people from the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace, Li Xian added. When Zhou Wen heard this, he roughly understood that the family clan of gods had definitely exerted pressure on the Yin family. Chapter 1672. Old Zhou, what do you think we should do? Li Xian was a fearless person. He didn't mean if he should take in the people from the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace, but he was asking Zhou Wen how to bring the people from the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace back to guide Ancient City. According to Li Xian, whether the Yin family could withstand the pressure or not depended on them. The problem was that since the family clan of gods was so persistent, they definitely had a motive. They wouldn't easily let Han Shinsakura and Sei Gasakai bring them to guide Ancient City safely. I'll pick them up, Zhou Wen said after some thought. All right. Since you have nothing better to do, it's good to go out and take a look, Li Xian said with a smile. He wanted to pick them up himself, but guide Ancient City had just been established. There were too many things he needed to do. Zhou Wen was also a hands-off boss, so Li Xian really couldn't leave. When I'm not around, pay more attention to the matters in the city, Zhou Wen said as he packed his things. I didn't stop paying attention when you were around, Li Xian said with a twitch of his lips. Zhou Wen thought about it and agreed. He really didn't worry about the matters in the city. It was all Li Xian's work. Then let's put it this way. I'll reply to Han Shinsakura. He's still waiting, Li Xian said as he walked out without chatting with Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen packed his things and looked at his phone that was charging. He realized that the battery had reached 3%. He estimated the time. At this rate, it would take more than a day to fully charge it. Before the overseas Nitin Flying Immortal Palace received Zhou Wen's reply, they had already begun mobilizing for the relocation. Moving more than 10,000 people inland was definitely not a trivial matter. There were too many aspects that needed to be taken care of. Dozens of ships advanced inland under the pull of whale-like companion beasts. From the looks of it, our luck isn't bad. We didn't encounter any particularly terrifying marine dimensional creatures. Shiraishi Satomi couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief when she saw the coastline from afar. There were many dimensional zones at sea that had been broken. From time to time, terrifying dimensional creatures would appear. Even the safe route they had taken in the past couldn't guarantee absolute safety. It was a good omen to be able to reach inland without any danger. Sometimes, the terrifying ones aren't the dimensional creatures, Han Shinsakura said calmly as he stood at the bow of the ship. Don't worry, Palace Master. We've already planned the route inland. We've also taken care of everything along the way. There won't be any problems, said the yellow-faced elder. Shiraishi Satomi was just about to ask something, but her gaze suddenly froze. She saw a person standing on the pier by the sea. He really came. Han Shinsakura also saw that person. He seemed to have expected it and wasn't surprised. Am he from the clan of gods? Why is he here? The yellow-faced elder's expression changed. The other elders were also shocked. It was impossible for Mo-he to come to the seaside for no reason. Mo-he's reputation was so great that he was one of the top humans. Even in the era when there were so many representatives, his ranking on the Rubik's Cube had never dropped out of the top 3. The most terrifying thing was that up to now, no one had been able to find Mo-he's weakness. He was very strong and could easily kill calamity creatures. What was even more terrifying was that no one could injure him. Injuring he was equivalent to injuring oneself. He would be fine, but they would die. Everyone, please wait a moment. He, who was dressed in black, stood by the sea. His face was angular, making him look like a beautiful marble sculpture. Dozens of large ships stopped in front of the pier. A gigantic whale-like companion beast floated on the sea, glaring at the tiny human figure. Why are you blocking our path? The yellow-faced elder asked I've never thought of blocking your path. I'm here to guide you, said calmly. I wonder what path you are going to guide us to, the yellow-faced elder asked with a frown. Survival. He said indifferently, everything under the sky is divine land. Only the children of God can live on divine land. If you aren't a citizen of God, how can you survive? Isn't the clan of gods too overbearing? If we don't join the clan of gods, will you not allow us to step foot on the land? The yellow-faced elder's expression turned ugly. No. He shook his head and said, be it the sea or the land, they are all divine lands. If we don't have the blessings of God, there's no place for us to stand no matter how big the world is. We can only sink. The disciples of the Nitin flying immortal palace heard him clearly as their expressions changed drastically. He had made it clear that if they didn't join the clan of gods, they would probably be buried in the sea today. If someone else had said such words, they would only treat it as a joke. However, they had already seen He's horror on the Magic Cube's livestream. He had the right to say such words. Is there only one way? Han Shinsakura finally spoke as he stared at He with a burning gaze. Only one way, He answered with certainty. Han Shinsakura didn't say anything else. All he did was silently pull out two katanas, one long and one short. His aura constantly converged as he stared at He like an abyss. The disciples of the Nitin flying immortal palace on the dozens of ships also summoned their companion beasts and drew their weapons to point at He. The huge companion beasts in the sea roared in unison, stirring up raging waves as though they were about to devour He. He stood there motionless, as though he hadn't seen the shocking killing intent. He was like a god that looked down on all living beings. Looking at He's lofty posture, Han Shinsakura smiled. He looked at He and said indifferently, He, your strength is indeed very strong and magical, but if I don't touch you, your strength won't be of any use. With that said, Han Shinsakura ordered the ship to sail to the dock and not attack He. Hundreds of whale-like companion beasts roared as they split the water and waves and swam towards the dock. He wasn't alarmed or happy. He looked at the behemoths and ships that were rushing over and slowly raised his right palm towards the sea. When he faced the sea, he clenched his fingers tightly. Boom! Boom! The sounds of explosions rang incessantly. Hundreds of whale-like behemoths seemed to be gripped tightly by an invisible hand. Their bodies were squeezed until they deformed and instantly exploded. None of the behemoths that were pulling the ship were spared. Blood instantly dyed the entire sea, turning the seawater blood-red. As the waves churned, it looked like an azure blood sea. The waves that were filled with blood slammed against the ship and splashed onto the disciples of the Nitin flying immortal palace. Everyone felt as though they had fallen into a demonic realm. They were so frightened by the scene in front of them that they lost their ability to think. They stood there in a daze, their faces filled with horror. Everyone looked at He as though they were looking at a devil from hell. They trembled uncontrollably as the timid Nitin flying immortal palace disciples involuntarily retreated. Chapter 1673. Han Shinsakura stared at Mauve and couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. Although he had the determination to fight to the death, he couldn't draw his sword. If it was an ordinary opponent, even if their strength was far above his, Han Shinsakura would still have the courage to fight. However, Mo was different. Only he could kill, but others couldn't kill him. Even if Han Shinsakura could slash the sun and moon, he couldn't slash Mo. Otherwise, he would only injure himself. Instantly, Han Shinsakura was in a dilemma. Must you do this? Seigasakai walked out of the cabin and stared at Mo. When Mo saw Seigasakai, he beamed. He looked at Seigasakai and said, I heard that you have the title of Sword Sage overseas. The Nitin Flying Immortal Ryu is also known as the best sword Dao overseas. It's just a favor from my friends, said Seigasakai with a frown. That's probably the case. Emohi nodded. These words immediately infuriated the disciples of the Nitin Flying Immortal Ryu. Perhaps Seigasakai wasn't the strongest human on earth, but his sword Dao realm was like a saint in the hearts of the Nitin Flying Immortal Ryu disciples. A warrior can be killed but not humiliated. Mo, I want to fight you, Han Shinsakura said with a gloomy expression. You're not qualified. Mo didn't even look at Han Shinsakura as he said to Seigasakai, since you are known as the overseas sword sage, I believe you might have some real talent. Then, I'll give you a chance. I'll only fight you with sword techniques and suppress my strength to the same range as yours. If you can take 3 strikes from me without being defeated, I'll let you come and go freely. If you lose, the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace will have to join my family clan of gods. Do you dare to agree? Seigasakai knew very well that it was impossible for things to end peacefully today. If he agreed, there was still hope. If he did not agree, the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace would probably be doomed. Moreover, Seigasakai was very confident in his own sword Dao. Putting aside the difference in their levels, he did not think that he was inferior to Mo in terms of sword Dao realm. He did not believe that he could not even withstand 3 strikes. Can your words represent the family of gods? Seigasakai looked at Mo and asked. If I say you can leave, no one from the family of gods will dare to touch you again. Of course, the prerequisite is that you, the Sword Saint, can withstand 3 of my attacks without being defeated. His goal was to bring the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace back to the family clan of gods, not to kill. He had only killed the companion beasts that were pulling the boat to intimidate everyone. All right, 3 swords to decide the winner. Seigasakai's mind was calm. He was not moved by Mo's words. At the same time, he did not really want to be undefeated in 3 strikes. He just wanted to win. If a swordsman did not have the will to win and only had the mentality of withstanding 3 sword strikes, then he would have already lost. Seigasakai summoned his companion beasts' twin blades. They were 2 samurai blades, one long and one short. The blades looked the same, with a demonic purple color. There seemed to be a faint sanguine glow amidst the purple. This pair of sabers of mine is called Ghost Cry and God Howl. They are both growth-type companion beasts. They have already grown to the Calamity grade, 1 level higher than me. I'll use this sword to fight you. You don't have to worry about anything. Just use the strength of a Calamity grade, Seigasakai said. It's just an external object. Mauve casually beckoned as seawater surged into his palm like a fountain. Under the effects of the cold air in his palm, it condensed into a sword. Casually shaking the ice sword, Mauve said, Since you are at the Terror grade, I'll suppress my strength to the Terror grade. Withstand 3 strikes from me and you can go wherever you want. Most of the disciples of the Nitin Flying Immortal Palace wore looks of indignation. Mo's actions were an insult to Sword Saint Seigasakai. There were also people secretly rejoicing. They felt that Seigasakai's chances of winning had increased, but they were also worried that Mo would not keep his promise. Please. Seigasakai's state of mind was as calm as an ancient well. He didn't have any emotional fluctuations because of Mo's words. With sword in hand, he stood above the sea like a mountain. He really does have the demeanor of a sword saint. Mo nodded slightly as his eyes turned serious. The ice sword in his hand stabbed at Seigasakai. It was completely different from the aura of crushing hundreds of companion beasts with one hand. His strike was ordinary and simple. It could even be said that it was ridiculously ordinary. No sword aura or sword beam appeared. The sword thrust was very slow, so slow that it made people feel like he was joking. Mo was still standing on the dock, at least hundreds of meters away from Sei Gasakai. When he stabbed out with his sword, his feet didn't move as he remained standing on the dock. However, for some reason, the sword tip that was slowly thrusting out seemed to be approaching Sei Gasakai. It wasn't just Sei Gasakai. Everyone who was watching the battle felt as though the sword was stabbing towards their hearts. Those who weren't resolute turned pale in fright as they involuntarily retreated. However, no matter how they retreated, the feeling that the sword tip was about to stab into their hearts lingered. It was as though their hearts would be pierced in the next second. When Han Shinsakura and Shiraishi Satomi saw this strike, their expressions turned abnormally solemn. They all knew that it was very difficult to train one's sword technique quickly. The faster the sword, the easier it was to kill. However, as long as one persisted in practicing, the sword would eventually become faster. It was just a matter of how much faster it was. However, to train one's sword slowly, it wasn't something that could be learned through practice alone. One had to have extremely high talent in the way of the sword and have an epiphany. Only then would it be possible to train one's sword slowly. Mo's slow sword was clearly not as simple as being slow. Its realm was so high that even Han Shinsakura's heart skipped a beat. The sword slowly stabbed over. It looked like it was easy to resolve, but when one really wanted to resolve it, they realized that there was no way to do so. This was because he was too slow. No matter how one dealt with it, one would only expose one's intentions to the other party. In a situation that was originally one of stillness, one suddenly realized that one had become the one moving. However, if one didn't resolve the slow sword, the sword would slowly stab over like a frog in warm water. Once one entered the other party's killing range, it would be impossible for the other party to resolve it. It was wrong to move, but it was also wrong to not move. Sei Gasakai immediately fell into a dilemma. Those who knew how terrifying this strike was were worried for Sei Gasakai, but Sei Gasakai didn't panic. Without any hesitation, he slashed at Mo with Ghost Weep. His blade wasn't slow at all. On the contrary, it was so fast that it appeared in front of Mo in an instant. Amazing! Han Shinsakura couldn't help but exclaim. This was the most authentic Nitin flying immortal Ryu. The long blade slashed at the enemy while the short blade protected him. The combination of movement and stillness was like the rotation of yin and yang. It was the only way to break the slow sword, but it was only limited to Sei Gasakai's realm. The terrifying saber beam brought with it by Ghost Weep had already slashed in front of Mauve. If Mauve continued thrusting forward, his sword would be blocked by God's Howl. If he retracted his sword and dodged, he would immediately fall into a passive situation. Not to mention 3 strikes, even 300 strikes or 3,000 strikes would probably not be able to defeat Sei Gasakai. Mauve didn't retreat, nor did he have any intention of retracting his sword. He actually used the ice sword condensed from seawater to meet Sei Gasakai's calamity-grade Ghost Weep. Is he going to break his promise? Everyone's hearts skipped a beat. How could an ice sword condensed from seawater resist a calamity-grade companion beast weapon unless Mo used his calamity-grade strength? However, when the sword and saber clashed, Mo didn't use his calamity-grade strength. The ice sword was shattered without any suspense. Everyone was overjoyed, but the next moment, everyone's faces turned ashen. They stood rooted to the spot, unable to believe what they had seen. When the saber and sword clashed, Mauve's ice sword was shattered. However, his sword was condensed from seawater. The shattered ice sword melted into water, and as Mauve's sword continued forward, it condensed into a sword again and pointed at Sei Gasakai's chest. Everything has its own characteristic. The Tao of mutual promotion and restraint lies in one's heart. To not even comprehend this, it looks like the Nitin flying immortal Ryu is nothing much, Mo said indifferently. Chapter 1674. You have lost. Bring the disciples of the Nitin flying immortal palace, and return to the family clan of gods with me. Mo he released his palm as the ice sword in his hand turned into a stream of water that returned to the sea. The faces of the Nitin flying immortal palace disciples were ashen. With Sei Gasakai's abilities, he had failed to withstand a single strike when Mo he had suppressed his strength to the same level as him. Furthermore, Sei Gasakai had used the calamity-grade ghost wailing god Howling Blade. This made them doubt Sei Gasakai's sword Dao. Sei Gasakai was rendered speechless. There was nothing more to say after such a thorough defeat. Mo he turned around and was about to leave, but he saw that not far behind him, there was a young man standing there. That young man was quietly sizing him up with a look of interest, which made Mo he frown. The youth was less than 100 meters away from him. At such a distance, he hadn't sensed his arrival at all. Just this point was enough to surprise him. Mr. Zhou. When Sei Gasakai saw Zhouwen, he said guiltily, "I'm sorry. I lost just now. I can only head to the family clan of gods according to the agreement." Mr. Qi, don't take it to heart. Zhouwen smiled and said to Mo he, "The family clan of gods is a huge family. I believe they won't snatch a guest from me." Mo he looked at Zhouwen and said, "That will depend on whether you have the ability to invite guests. You said that the Nitin flying immortal Dao is nothing much. I wonder if you dare to make a pact of 3 strikes with me?" Zhouwen said without batting an eyelid. The king of thieves lives up to his name. He really has a deep-rooted thieving nature, Mo he said sarcastically. The matter of Zhou when being the king of thieves was no longer a secret among the 6 families. Before Mo he became a spokesperson, he had seen Zhou Wen's battle through the Rubik's Cube, so he naturally didn't dare underestimate him. He dared to make a pact of 3 strikes with Sei Gasakai, but he didn't dare say such words to Zhouwen. It wasn't that Mo he believed that Zhouwen was stronger than him. It was just that the king of thieves had displayed powerful spatial powers. Even if Zhouwen only dodged, he wasn't confident that he could defeat him in 3 strikes. Furthermore, Mo he was able to defeat Sei Gasakai in 1 strike not because his sword Dao realm was much stronger than Sei Gasakai's, but because he had studied the Nitin flying immortal Ryu's sword Dao before he came. He had also gathered a large amount of information about Sei Gasakai. It could be said that he knew Sei Gasakai like the back of his hand, which allowed him to defeat with 1 strike. Was his style. There was a lot of information on Zhouwen in the family clan of gods, but they couldn't fully understand Zhouwen through the information. At the very least, Mo he believed that the information wasn't everything about Zhouwen. "You misunderstand me. I'm not asking you to defeat me in 3 strikes. Zhouwen shook his head. "So, you want me to take 3 of your sword strikes?" Mo he's face turned cold, and he couldn't help but feel some anger in his heart. Ever since he became the spokesperson, he had never been looked down upon like this. Although Zhouwen was known as the king of thieves, that was only in the past. Mo he didn't think that Zhouwen was qualified to say such things to him now. Of course not. Zhouwen shook his head again. Upon hearing Zhouwen's words, Mo he's expression eased a little. He looked at Zhouwen and said, "Then what do you mean by the pact of 3 strikes?" Zhouwen didn't answer him. All he did was wave at Han Shinsakura. "Come over and help me." Han Shinsakura was taken aback when he heard that. He didn't know what Zhouwen was up to, but he still walked over to Zhouwen's side. "Master, why did Zhouwen get Han Shinsakura to go?" Shiraishi Satomi asked Sei Gasakai in puzzlement. "How can we see through a figure like him? However, Mr. Zhou definitely has his reasons." "Just continue watching," Sei Gasakai said. "Sir, What instructions do you have? Han Shinsakura came in front of Zhou and bowed. I remember that you are Mr. Qi's disciple. You should have obtained the true teachings of Mr. Qi's Nitin Flying Immortal Ryu, right? Zhou asked Han Shinsakura. He didn't know what Zhou was up to as he watched without a word. I don't dare say that it's a true teachings. I've been working hard to follow in Master's footsteps, Han Shinsakura answered. Sakura's sword Dao is about to reach my realm, Sei Gasakai said. That's enough. Zhou nodded in satisfaction. Zhou, what are you trying to do? He asked with a frown. Just now you said that the Nitin Flying Immortal Ryu is nothing much. Then, I'll teach him 3 strikes on Mr. Qi's behalf. It's the same rule as before. If you can take 3 strikes from him without being defeated, you can take them anywhere you want. The moment Zhou said that, everyone was stunned speechless. Everyone had already seen He's strength. Even Sei Gasakai couldn't withstand a single strike. Although Han Shinsakura was a genius and his sword Dao cultivation level was close to Sei Gasakai's, it was unbelievable that he could defeat He with just 3 strikes. This time, not only did He's expression turn cold, even his eyes turned cold. He stared at Zhou with a burning gaze and said, "You will pay the price for your arrogance. You only need to answer if you want to bet or not," Zhou said indifferently. "All right, I'll grant your wish. However, after that, I will fight you. I originally didn't want to be your enemy, but you are forcing me," he said coldly. "Let's talk after you take 3 strikes from him." As Zhou spoke, he waved his hand at Han Shinsakura. "Lend me your blade. I'll teach you 3 strikes on Mr. Qi's behalf." Although Han Shinsakura had some doubts, he still held the blade in front of Zhou with both hands. Zhou took the katana and casually waved it twice, as though he was familiarizing himself with the center of gravity of the blade. "Master, isn't Zhou being too arrogant?" Shiraishi Satomi said with a strange expression. Although she knew that Zhou was human emperor, it wouldn't be easy for him to defeat he even with the strength that human emperor had displayed in the past. It was unbelievable that teaching Han Shinsakura 3 strikes on the spot would allow him to defeat he. In fact, it wasn't just Shiraishi Satomi. The elders also felt that Zhou might not be too arrogant. Even if he was human emperor, he couldn't underestimate an expert at he's level. Even if Zhou really had such a powerful sword Dao, it was impossible for Han Shinsakura to immediately learn such a profound sword Dao. No matter how talented a swordsman was, it was impossible for him to learn a profound sword technique in such a short period of time. What was even more unacceptable was that Zhou had begun teaching Han Shinsakura sword techniques in front of he. He had no intention of avoiding them. Is this person really reliable? It wasn't just the elders. Even the ordinary disciples felt that Zhou's actions were a little too childish. To teach 3 strikes in front of others and even use them to defeat them, was he treating them as idiots? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.